OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
7:30 on this Friday morning, the 4th of November, and welcome along, as always, on Friday to OTB AM, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at movember.com. Delighted to be joined in studio this morning by the presenter of the Koi Gig Pod and Sligo woman, Kathleen McNamee. Morning, Kathleen.
Morning, Shane. How are you?
And Cork man and OTB AM producer extraordinaire, Kolbe and SA. Kolbe, good morning.
Shane Kathleen.
Sorry, it's not Kolbe, it's actually Kolbe, isn't it?
Kolbe. The Munster pronunciation is Kolbe.
It's an important distinction, I think.
So we have Monaghan and Sligo here. How do you say my name?
Colm.
Yeah, very good.
I
only know that from the last few months of knowing you, that I didn't say it like that before.
One of my best mates is called Kolbe, and we call him Kolbe at home, but of course, because you're from Munster,
And if you're in Munster, what would you call him?
I'd call him Kolbe.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I know, I'm learning.
Suits you.
I'm learning. Doesn't suit me, boy. Sorry,
no.
anyone offended. We were in South Monaghan yesterday.
Thanks for coming on.
The accent slot. Yeah, I'll just leave. Guys, Europa League last night. It's funny. It was funny watching United in the lime green shirts and them all devastated after the game because they won 1-0. If you look at the scoreboard, you're thinking, oh, what's wrong here? Of course, they needed the 2-goal cushion to qualify without having to play one of these Champions League losers. It was a strange game, but I don't know. I don't know where I feel about United. When I saw Harry Maguire up front, I think that was the epitome of what the hell is going on.
I wasn't actually watching the game because I was out and about last night, but I saw. I was on Twitter and I saw somewhere that Harry Maguire was playing up front, and I was like, is this a cry of help from Eric Ten Hag being like, please give me some money in January, please?
Southgate must have just been watching going, what,
8 minutes as well, and he had other options on the bench. But I like to concentrate on the positives, so we'll take about Garnacho scoring a great goal, set up lovely by Cristiano Ronaldo, great through ball. Well, standard enough through ball at that level, but I feel like he gets that extra little bit of credit when he does something well, Ronaldo, these days.
It
was actually bobbled a bit.
When he actually plays.
Yeah, exactly.
When he doesn't walk out of the stadium before the match even ends. Well done.
He's improving all the time, he's one for the future. But the passing there, they actually bobbled through to him, but Garnacho's first touch and then finish was brilliant. But he's a serious talent by the looks of it.
Yeah, Ronaldo, he looks like a good player, this Ronaldo lad. He's good. He is good. Garnacho has talent.
There was complaints about his attitude in the pre-season tour, and Bruno Fernandes said the same afterwards last night, that there was question marks over his approach to training. But you can see the raw talent there, and he becomes Manchester United's youngest ever goal scorer in Europe.
Didn't know that,
beating George Best by 33 days.
Ooh.
So he has that kind of Kiko Makeda bit of history to him at the moment. Makeda flew out of the traps, Aston Villa 2009. Then he scored once more against, I think it was Sunderland, or maybe Chelsea, maybe twice more. And then, what became of Makeda. So hopefully Garnacho goes a different trajectory, but he looks like a much superior player, and Ten Hag's a fan, most importantly.
What did become of Makeda? Where is he?
Played for several clubs.
He did. He was one of them journeymen kind of thing.
Yeah, it'd be a good quiz question, actually.
He's now playing for Turkish Super League club Ankaragucu. There you go. He's 31.
31, yeah, that would make sense, yeah.
Right.
Another attacking option, and I think Garnacho was more to his game than Elanga, but I rate Elanga for certain games. He's actually really useful to have in the team, but there's something about the kind of self-confidence of Garnacho that I like, and it's just kind of the raw materials to work with. And you can see that Ronaldo's a big fan of his too, when he set up the goal, when he scored, he went over and he's given him big hugs and big smiles, and you can tell when Ronaldo really buys into a young player,
under his wing. The Gooners then, Kathleen, top of the group, so finishing at 15 points with 4 wins, 1 loss. PSV finishing in second on 13 points, 2 behind them. So job done, I guess, is the underlying thing.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of all they wanted from this group. Even I didn't catch the full game last night, but I just kind of watched some of the highlights when I got home, and it was a bit of a struggle for Arsenal. 1-0, it's not exactly an emphatic win, but at the same time, it wasn't, the main starting team. It was kind of testing out a few players, giving them the opportunity. They managed to grind out the win, and that's kind of what Arsenal this season have done in most situations. Obviously, there's been 1 or 2 slip-ups, but the thing that they haven't been able to do in the past is just get those little dirty wins, and I feel like that's exactly what last night was. Always nice to see Tierney getting his moment.
Lovely strike as well, yeah.
Beautiful goal.
Really, really, really nice goal. And I was talking about his shirt being ripped open and him.
Yeah. More important.
Him still having it tucked in, even though it was ripped, it was quite impressive. But no, it was a really, really nice goal, really nice strike, and he's had a bit of a up and down time for the last while, like just even with injuries and stuff as well. So I think even just for his confidence, it was really nice to see him get the goal.
Legends. Speaking of legends, I'm not going to put Kieran Tierney in the legends bracket just yet, but you were down meeting some cop legends last night.
I was at the Off the Ball Roadshow with Robbie Fowler and John Aldridge, it was actually really cool. It was the first time I'd properly been in that sort of like Irish Liverpool obsessive fan sort of culture. Like, I don't really have too many Liverpool fans in my life. My dad's an Everton supporter, so that might be part of the reason why. But yeah, it was really interesting listening to them chat, and particularly the talk around Jack Charlton and, you know, what he did for Ireland. And like, Aldridge got quite emotional several times.
Really?
He was, really, really emotional. And he was really strong on the fact that there should be a statue to him somewhere at the Aviva. And he was like calling out the FAI, he was calling out the government. And like, he got the whole crowd kind of whipped up about it. And everyone was, you know, chanting that they wanted this statue. And I mean, he's not wrong in it, but I was quite surprised at how emotional he was talking about it still, because I presume he's probably talked about it quite a bit since the passing of Jack. But yeah, it was a really fun night. Lots of good stories. Stay tuned on OTB Digital for a few of those coming out over the next few days. Nice. And it was kind of one of those nights where, like, there was obviously football on, but it wasn't being watched, and it was kind of nice actually just immersing yourself in that sort of nostalgia and culture. And the lads were like great crack. I mean, I'm sure they're well versed at this stage of how to get an Irish crowd going, and they certainly knew how to. You'd
forget that, you'd almost forget the impact that Jack Charlton's death must have had on those players, because, I mean, we just think of him as, he was just the manager, the gaffer of those players, but really he was there. He was so close to them for so many years. When you think of the 3 tournaments and the years that he brought them through, and the games and the travelling and the flights and the hotels, like, he was so close to them for so long, and he did so much for Irish football, Jack, that it must be emotional for the likes of John Aldridge and those players to kind of think back and reminisce now that he's no longer with us.
Yeah, well, like, Aldridge said several times last night that he was the favourite manager that he ever worked with, like, hands down. And there was a couple of times where he talked about, you know, difficult moments he was going through in his personal life, and that, you know, Jack was the person who came to him and checked on him and made sure he was okay. And it might have been outside of camp time or like Ireland time. And he said, I think even like past the time when they were working together, he was still the person that would come and check in on him and be like, are you all right? Mm-hmm. You know, are you getting on okay? And I suppose it's such a testament to his character that he did that, and it's so nice now that those players are able to talk about him in that way and are able to have those memories beyond just the football, because I think obviously you have all these great moments as a footballer, especially of a footballer of his calibre, and they stand out to you. Like, he talked about the first time scoring into the Kop and like what it meant to him, but he was like, that's the stuff that really gets you through, especially when you stop playing. You know, you have your glory moments, but it's the support of people like Jack, or the memories that they gave you, and the people that matter more.
Our own Emma Carroll has suggested there should be a statue of Jack on the Walkinstown roundabout. Perfect place.
That would be great.
Perfect place to put it.
Jonathan Wilson has written the book Two Brothers about Jack and Bobby.
Oh yeah.
So Joe's going to interview him soon about it. But Joe's saying there it's an incredible read. Even the first 5 pages just sucks you in completely. And the one thing that immediately stands out is that I suppose we all associate Jack Charlton with backs against the wall football and put him under pressure and all that, but that he was absolutely fascinated and thoroughly enjoyed talking about the game with people, you know, like, and the tactical insight that he used to just, like, couldn't get enough of. Like, he would devour people's minds about it and get more information that he could. And even in the Finding Jack documentary, you could see his tactical insights on paper that he'd write about, and he was kind of, you know, talking about the kind of high press game before that became a term at all, you know, and Jack was all about that. And I'm just not surprised at all that players like John Aldridge and everybody from that era just such fondness for him, because of, like, he made a lot of those players' careers. Yeah. You know, and I like it. There's the other side of him, that the football still wasn't as good as it could have been considering the talent on show, but he was much more of a tactical thinker than people, I think, realised, you know. And that book kind of sums it up.
A lot of Irish players, like nowadays especially, just want to get to one major tournament just to like look at the women's team. I mean, they can, like, hopefully they'll push on after the World Cup and get to more major tournaments. But when you think of the players who were around for that entire Charlton era under, like, 3 major tournaments, 1 Euros and 2 World Cups, that's just the stuff dreams are made of for those players. I'd say, like, if you said to them in 1987, you're gonna play in 3 major tournaments, they're like, nah.
It's almost incomprehensible even to, like, us as fans now, like, that sort of opportunity. I know we talk about, say, the women going to the World Cup next year, and hopefully they kick on. This new Nations League format may not help too much with that. We will get to that later on.
Need a bit of time.
Do 10 minutes on that. Wait for it.
There's about 2 pages of notes just trying to work out, like, what actually happened. But yeah, like, and especially for me, I think last night, because I was never really around that sort of, like, Jack Charlton culture. You know, I never really spent all that much time around people who were chanting about Jackie's Army. It was such a, and I've read about it, I've heard about it, I listened to all the nostalgia pieces that are done every single year on it. But it was something really nice to witness it. And then also there was, like, a little bit of sadness as well, that's just not normal culture for us in football the last few years. Like, we just haven't had that level of success, and maybe it'll come in time, but, like, the idea of going to 3 major tournaments is just unthinkable, really, for me.
Yeah, it just seems so like watching the World Cup in 2002 with the TV being wheeled in, as we spoke about in the show yesterday, like, just seems so long ago. Long ago, because the TV's being wheeled in for a start. That just wouldn't.
Oh, I love that.
How would it happen now for kids in schools?
Probably
just go on YouTube.
Yeah, they probably just have, like, projectors up in the schools.
I bet they don't have chalkboards.
That's not sad.
They don't have chalkboards, do they?
It evolves,
My old primary school still has chalkboards.
You need the chalkboards.
The old VHS it was cumbersome to bring in.
Just
you know what I mean? It was cumbersome. And every school seemed to have the same setup. Something Kevin Bridges touched on last night.
You were Kevin Bridges.
Bridges, yeah.
Is he doing a few nights? I
think I originally only did 2. Now he's doing 4 or 5. His first night was Wednesday, so I went last night. Our own Phil Egan's going tonight. And then he's doing Saturday and Sunday as well.
How was he? Really good?
Oh, he's so good.
See, 3 arena, wasn't it?
It's the best I've seen him. He's looking phenomenal.
Is he?
He's lost a load of weight. And he's trim. He's a kid now. He's married. The whole shebang.
Right.
A lot of kind of audience interaction. You wouldn't want to be in the front row at all with him. And of course, he's a big Celtic fan, huge football fan. Yeah. And I was talking to a show legend in Graham Hunter about the Gerard Pique story last night, and hopefully Graham will come on early next week to talk about that. And I was just telling him, I'm at Kevin Bridges, and of course he had him on his own podcast, a big interview, and it was actually, if anybody hasn't heard that podcast, I mean, like, obviously you're going to listen to all of our podcasts, but when you're done with those, you could go to the big interview of Graham Hunter, and he has Kevin Bridges on, and you think this is going to be a general chat about comedy and about his love of Celtic. But again, like Jack Charlton, talk about tactical insight. Kevin Bridges can talk football all day long. So Graham was telling me, asking me today, did Carl Spain warm up? And I was like, yeah, he did. How'd you know that? The 3 of them went to the Champions League final together in May. He said the lads never shut up about football, but they know nothing about Spanish football. He wants to make that very clear.
Yeah.
So then I asked Graham, any chance that the 2 lads could come on, Kevin Bridges and Carl Spain together? So that's pending. So hopefully we'll have that.
I was just about to say, I would love to be at the, like, pre-match pints for that. Like, just imagine sitting around that table and just listen to the 3 of them chat.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get to do it here.
He is
brilliant. That's the ambition. Yeah.
I saw Kevin Bridges live. I think it must have been the last time he was in Dublin, but it was certainly pre-COVID. I can't remember what year it was, but he's one of those people like imagine being a comedian walking out into an arena setting. It's one thing being in, like, smaller club settings and even the Olympian places like that, but if you walk into an arena, it must be, well, they're used to it, but it must be terrifying. Like, he's top tier comedian. Like.
I love him, and like he uses so many football analogies too for everyday life, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I know Phil Egan will tonight as well. But like, he's incredible to watch. Like, his dealing of hecklers is unparalleled.
Does he encourage it, or
he just shuts them down if he doesn't like what they're saying? And like you say, it's an arena. So, you know, the night goes on and, like, you're able to drink away in there, so there's no stopping anybody really. Like, the bar closes before it starts, but you can get as much as you want before that. So, like, as the night goes on, people are getting a bit leerier.
Yes.
And there's no problem to him at all. Like, he kind of relishes a bit of it. And there was one poor fella, I won't name him now, like, but there's a poor fella at the front row, And Kevin got talking to him, and whatever it was about, your man's answer anyway, Kevin wasn't having it. But you know, when you're back, you can only hear the mumblings of whatever he's saying.
He has to repeat it, obviously.
But Kevin wasn't having it, and Jesus, I felt sorry for the fella for the rest of the show, because he kept it coming back to him. And other people would say stuff in the crowd, and he was enjoying their quips, but he was saying to this fella, like, you see, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. I'd say the fella went down, head down for the rest of the night, like, as he went home.
That's what you want, though, isn't it?
If anyone's going, you've a lot to look forward to. And Carl Spain was excellent in the warm-up act.
Right.
Really, really good. It's a great night.
Is he your number one comedian, Colm?
Carl Spain?
No, well, Bridges.
ITB up there. 100% up there, yeah. And also, like, the football angle too, you know.
Of course.
So, like, that's why I'm saying to Kevin, like, come on the show, because we can talk about football.
Get him
There's no problem at all.
Surely. You mentioned Gerard Pique there, Colm, as well. So he said he's retired from football after his final game at the Nou Camp this Saturday. So he's 35 years of age. He posted a video on social media to make the announcement. Barca play Almeria in La Liga for his last game. So in a statement he said, "I've always said that there would not be any other team after Barca, and that's how it will be. 600 games, 30 trophies, 8 La Liga titles, 3 Champions Leagues, 7 Copa del Reys." Of course, he was in headlines recently as well, Gerard Pique. It's interesting timing.
I have a slightly funny story about this one, where last night I was at the Roadshow and Nathan was hosting, and I turned to him and I was like, "Oh, PK is retired," and he was like, "Pat Kenny?"
I can see the resemblances.
Pat will never retire.
Yeah, we had like a whole conversation where he's like, "It's very sudden and out of the blue," and I was like, "Yeah, it is." And then I realised that we were talking about 2 totally different people.
Yeah, Pat Kenny's he's fine, folks. He's not retiring. He's staying put. But Gerard Pique is retiring from football. I think United fans will remember him as the player that...
Oh, he never was at United, really.
Never was.
No, yeah, he never... Yeah, he was a lot of, like, League Cup games, and he was very unfortunate to be around when Rio Ferdinand and Nuani Village had that sensational partnership. But he also wasn't fully developed, and he would say that himself. Like, he did the overlap recently with Gary Neville, and he said that, like, you know, that he couldn't get into that team, and it was fair. And I don't think Fergie very rarely played a back three, so he didn't really have a chance of getting in. But I remember being disappointed when he went back to Barcelona, because you could see he had something, but, like, talk about making the right decision, like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah. Like, Barca have their own debts of billion quid and financial crisis, and I'm sure they have to cut down the wage bill. I don't know what wages Pique is on, but I'm sure he's...
Well, I was reading on ESPN this morning, and they said sources at Barcelona wouldn't confirm whether he was going to get any of the money that he's owed back. Right. And he'd been told during the summer that he wasn't going to play that much this season, because like, obviously he's like, what, 5th choice or something now, like he's quite low down the pecking order.
Okay.
And that he basically, I think, said to them that, you know, he'll stick around, he loves Barcelona, but he wants to retire at Barcelona, wants to retire at Camp Nou. Next season, the Camp Nou's undergoing all the renovations, so he's not going to stick around to then, even though his contract goes until like 2024, I think.
Yeah.
Out of the Champions League now, he's not going to have the opportunity to play in that. You would think you'd see out the league, and maybe there is more to it, but when you start adding up some of the stuff, it does make a tiny bit of sense. It does,
but it was so jarring to read the push notification. Like, I sent it to you both, and I was like, I can't believe this. And you were saying you felt you saw it coming at base, and we all kind of did. But just to see someone go in November, like Gary Neville did, you know, something similar. That now famous West Bromwich Albion performance in the January of his last season, when he went into the office the next day, Alex Ferguson said, "I'm done. You got to get rid of me." But like, he just saw the season out. I was expecting that. But obviously there's more to it here. It's a financial situation. Like, himself and Busquets are owed an awful lot of money from Barcelona with deferred wages and salaries. But I think Pique was fine with that. If it's a pure footballing reason, Xavi did tell him that he wouldn't be playing very much. The one reason, and actually Will O'Callaghan mentioned on the show last night, was the late signing of Jules Koundé, or the late registration, more to the point, probably prolonged Pique's stay. And if Koundé had signed in time and was good to go, Pique may have announced this in the summer. And if he had done that, it would have been a very different conversation. It would have been simply a tribute to Pique. But now that he's leaving in November, it's the suspicious circumstances, what's happening. So I do feel sorry a bit for his legacy. Not that Pique needs any sympathy. Like, he's had an absolutely amazing life and won everything you could ever do. And I think he's going to be a very successful businessman on the business side of things, and he's a lot of interest in that. And I'd say you'll see him back at Barcelona in a kind of administration role, or
well, that's the thing, because he owns quite a lot of the rights, doesn't he? Like the TV rights and stuff to La Liga.
And he owns another team in Spain as well. Like, he's a busy man. Like, he's kind of the Spanish Gary Neville, isn't he?
Gary Neville.
Yeah.
Yes.
He does a lot. Like, he does an awful lot.
and he split from Shakira, didn't he, earlier in the year?
Yeah, he's a new partner, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to turn this into a gossip column, but like
he might be on. Like, you know.
I think if you're a footballer, 35 years of age, and as well, like Christmas coming up, you're like, do I have to do this again? Like, miss out on another Christmas with the kids and the family and letting the hair down and enjoying it, because Christmas.
I suppose as well with the World Cup coming up, he's probably going to be, well, he's probably not going to be sitting around. I presume he's probably doing some sort of punditry or whatever, but you're probably sitting around being like, do I want to hold out for like a month and then come back to play?
Oh, yeah. The exit plan is like he's handing in his notice, you know, in his mind mentally at least. And like even Neville was saying to Paul Scholes, and another one of those, I'm like promoting the overlap here, but it was a great conversation with Scholes, and he was saying like in Neville's last season on a trip away to Arsenal, he had like architecture plans out about buildings that he wanted to invest in, you know, and his mind wasn't fully on football anymore. And with Pique, if you're not playing, he has so many other interests. It kind of makes sense. It's just so jarring that it's literally this weekend.
Yeah. There was another part of that ESPN piece, I think it was Sam Marsden and Moise Lorenz, that said he started considering it after the 3-3 draw with Inter Milan, because he like was kind of singled out for a bit of criticism during it, and like it was almost the way they set up, it was almost like there was players in front of him as defence to his defence, and he was a bit insulted by that, and he was kind of like, oh, why am I bothering anymore?
Yeah, I know the effort of it. Some in the comments scored in his Champions League debut for United. That was the Roma game, was it? Remember the header?
Oh, Pique in the 7-1 win, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, possibly.
No, it was away from home in Rome.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, he would have played that season, 06-07.
Was it a 2-2 draw, maybe?
Yeah.
Dave McLean as well says, is it not the Spotify Camp Nou? Barca sold their soul over the last 9 months.
I think
it is still a Spotify Camp Nou, isn't it? Nobody calls it that, but
yeah, it is Spotify Camp Nou.
It's the three Olympia, isn't it? As well.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I don't think
just to get it correct. Here's what is coming up across the show between now and 10 o'clock this morning. So we'll be joined in the studio very shortly by Aisling Maher, the Dublin camogie star. Craig Ray, the South African rugby pundit, will join us to big up South Africa and take the pressure off Ireland heading into the match on Saturday at the Viva Stadium. 8:35 we'll look at the sports pages. Quinny will be with us at 8:50 as well to look ahead to tomorrow's test. Daniel Davey, nutritionist, 9:10. Extraordinary life. He's got a new book out as well. He's done work with the Leinster rugby players, with the Dublin footballers as well. So really good tips he'll bring us as well for nutrition and getting your diet right. And then from 9:30 I was with Neville Southall and Ian Rush, two legends, Merseyside legends on either side of the divide yesterday in Dublin. So we'll bring you that chat. Really interesting stuff from the lads talking about the Hillsborough chance. Ian Rush is really, really strong on that, and looking back in their own careers, they come up against each other of course in the 89 FA Cup final, the classic. Liverpool won 3-2 when Ian Rush scored 2 goals. So loads still to come on the show between now and 10 o'clock. We can bring you very shortly the chat with Aisling Maher, but OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember Effortless Shave, Magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. As I said, up next, live in studio with the St Vincent's and Dublin camogie star Aisling Maher to launch this year's AIB Camogie Club All-Ireland Championships and the AIB GA All-Ireland Club Championship. First though, here's John Giles on last night's show talking about how Spurs are actually overachieving given the players at Antonio Conte's disposal. Back in a sec.
In terms of where Spurs go from here, like the other side of that is people have been critical of Conte for being overly cautious with some of the Spurs players that he has at his disposal. Is that a criticism that's fair to level at him?
No, because they're not that good. You know, like if he had the talent that, say, Liverpool had at his disposal, and you'd say, well, the players... But I think he's getting more out of the players than anybody could. You know, if you look at the team, and there's some good, they're really good pros, but the attitude he has, Richie, is down to him. What they're actually, they're third in the table. They're not that far behind the top teams. Manchester City, and Arsenal not that far behind. With what? You know, I mean, if you looked at him and his team and said, well, even the Arsenal team, how many Spurs players would get into that team? But obviously Harry Kane would and Son would. Yeah. But a lot of them are just ordinary good pros, and he has them good pros. But he's getting the most out of them, and that's all managers can do, get the best players out of the players he has at his disposal.
Yeah, John Giles speaking there on the show last night with the lads, 7:54 AM on this Friday morning's OTB. I'm delighted to be joined in studio now by the Dublin camogie star and 2022 All-Star nominee as well, Aisling Maher. Morning, Aisling, how are things?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you in. A lot of success for St Vincent's this year. So you won the Dublin Senior Camogie Club title, first time since 2019. I know it's only a few year gap, but still nice to kind of grab it again after a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels like a longer gap when you're losing 2 championship finals during that time.
And COVID as well,
so.
sure, probably makes it feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Time's a bit warped, I think, for everybody. So definitely good to get back to winning ways.
So 14 to 10 points against Nafiana, and the guys were just saying to me like before the show, but I'd totally forgotten this, but Brian Mullins, club legend, had passed away not long before it that game, so that must have been quite an emotional event.
Yeah, just on the way to the game, actually, that I'd heard he'd passed away. So definitely a bit of an emotional roller coaster. You know, obviously you're up and down before championship finals anyway, trying to process everything, and then to have something like that thrown in the mix is definitely a bit of a challenge. So look, it was something we spoke about prior to the game, and actually again at half time as well. I guess we just wanted to kind of remember him and honour him in the best way that we could at that time. Obviously the last thing Brian would have wanted was matches being cancelled or anything like that, so the best thing we could do is just go out and kind of play the way he played, I guess, and represent the club to the best of our abilities. So nice to be able to do that.
You certainly did it on the day as well with your scoring tally. Was it 12 points you got in the match?
Yeah, well, including frees, so I won't take too much credit for them.
Well, at 114 it's still pretty impressive.
That's Erling Haaland stuff. You're the Erling Haaland of the Dublin Camogie team yesterday.
That's a compliment now. I don't think I've ever gotten anything that high before.
Like when you get, I know it's team game, and it's maybe only after you retire that you can kind of look back and assess and appreciate individual honours. But like I said, All-Star nominee this year, and little things like that in moments, do they mean much at the time? Is it the kind of thing you look back on and say, that means a lot to me? Or is it just one of those things where you're kind of coasting along in your career and you don't really think about it?
Yeah, look, it's always nice to get those kind of individual nods along the way, but like realistically, any of that sort of stuff, you know, there's still team awards regardless of whether or not they're given out to an individual, because without the team you don't get there in the first place, you know, that kind of way, regardless of whether that's, say, with the All-Star nomination this year, 2 of us from the team being nominated, it's because the team made it to quarterfinals that you're given the opportunity for, you know, players to showcase their game a little bit more and get those nominations. So I was slagging Ash, the other forward who got nominated, saying, you know, the 2 of us are playing in the full forward line getting nominated, we're stealing all the glory from the backs doing the hard work. But yeah, look, they're always nice to get.
Like, it's funny because we were chatting to Lee Keegan and then a few lads yesterday on the show. Luke Connolly was on as well, and they're talking about the club success they've had this year, and I guess trying to compare it to county success, and the comparison's always made, but I mean, how much more does it mean to win stuff? It's obviously lovely to win games and tournaments as well with the Dubs, but when you do it with the people you've grown up with and the community around you in St Vincent's, like it must mean that maybe a slight bit more, maybe, does it? Yeah,
look, it's lovely to get back to the club, but you know, like you said, I'm in with Vincent since I was probably 4 or 5 years of age, so like it's a special feeling, you know. All the girls that I would have grown up with, gone to school with, hung around at home with, are all my mates on the team, so like it is definitely very special to get back to the club, and like that, even everybody outside of the team are people who've been coaching you, mentoring you since, you know, you're this height, so it's lovely to be able to kind of have that feeling of getting back in with everybody, and yeah, club is a very special one, definitely.
And how's everyone on the team feeling heading into Leinster?
Yeah, there's good excitement. We had a bit of a gap. We had 6 weeks between the Dublin Championship final and first round of Leinster.
Right.
So yeah, that's
this weekend you're playing Thomastown?
The following weekend, Saturday week, yeah,
okay.
The 12th we're out. So getting towards the latter stages of 6 weeks now, thankfully, because it's long enough, like, to keep it going for, you know, and you can't keep energy and momentum and everything up at 90 for 6 weeks. So to be fair to management, I think they've done a good job of, you know, letting us come down for a little bit, but then you have the effort of trying to push it back up again. So yeah, look, I think we're going well. Looking forward to actually just getting out on the pitch now, kind of starting to get impatient in the last week, if anything.
Do you have any games in between times, like even just friendly sort of ones, to kind of keep you in that game mentality? Because as you say, if you're just training for 6 weeks, that's really hard to get yourself like game sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we did, thankfully, and I think you'd need to, like, you couldn't keep the momentum going just with training, I don't think, for that long. So yeah, no, thankfully we've managed to play kind of close enough to a challenge game a week at this rate, whether they're kind of in-house or colleges or other club teams that are still going, you know. You're kind of just taking games off anyone you can get this time of year.
Exactly. Ashton, will you settle the debate for us? Is it a Hurl or Hurley? We had Paddy Stapleton on the show yesterday, and he's written a couple of children's books, and he's given the title. He's done both. Like, he's printed both because he knows it's a controversial topic. I think we put a poll up the other day, and it was fairly fairly split down the middle.
Split.
I think it's a geographical thing, but like, what did you call it
I
growing
think
up?
it's geographical as well. And it was funny because I was in at the launch for the club championships that AIB were hosting the other day, and even like the guys on set were saying, "Hey, do you want me to call it a Hurley? Do you want me to call it a Hurley?" And I was saying I always call it a Hurl, but like
So
Jesse
did I.
Hutchinson, I know, was chatting to you guys, and he was in there and he was like, "Absolutely not! Like it's a Hurley."
All the lads in Munster called it a Hurley.
Yeah, now some people get very offended. I wouldn't get offended either way, but I would call it a Hurl. I'd have to
Call him a producer.
firmly go.
He's the Cork man in the box there already sent him here. It's a Hurley. Sorry, is that bad? That's a bad accent. It's a Hurl, I think.
I think it's a Hurl as well. He's not here, so we'll have
Exactly.
I say with Hurl as well, so that's
You call it
3.
Hurl?
Yeah.
3 out of 3, 100%.
Sorry. Like, it was the cutest thing ever. Paddy brought in his first Hurl/Hurley, which was like the Tipperary colours on it, and I mean the thing must have been about this size. Like, it was the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. And he brought it in and he was talking about the process of getting your first hurl and like the way the hurl is made, and like it as I said to him, it reminded me of Harry Potter, like going into the wand shop and getting
And
your
he
first
said it
wand.
was like going into Santa's workshop.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. Like, do you remember getting your first hurl? Was it not that magical a moment for you, or was it one of those things where you remember picking up a Hurl/Hurley for the first time?
Well, I actually do remember it, but for slightly different reasons, because my parents obviously weren't as sentimental as Paddy's were. What I remember is getting like a size 28 hurl, a 28-inch hurl when I started playing, and I was only about 5, and it was definitely because my parents were like, you'll grow into it. We're not buying a new one of them every couple of months.
Not a pair of shoes, like, it's a hurl.
So I remember finding it only a few years ago, like, and I use a size 32 now, and I'm a little bit taller than I was when I was 5.
Yeah.
So I was like, what was the crack with that? And I was like, we were updating school uniforms and boots and everything else. Didn't need another thing that was going to be too small for you every few minutes. So
Didn't work out too bad in the end.
No.
yeah, maybe that's the trick.
Probably is important, because I guess you have to. Even Paddy was talking about the fact that I can't remember what size of hurley he has, maybe 35, but he was saying like it's probably slightly bigger than he needs it, but he's a couple of times in matches as a cornerback hooked someone just had enough length on the hurl to do it. So it's one of those things you need to be comfortable with the weight and the size of it and the boss and everything, but like nobody really thinks about it outside the game, but I'm sure within the game you have to get it right. Sorry, I'm obsessing over it now, because he was talking about the sawdust and everything, but it was just, he made it sound magical, the whole hurl making process, but also the process of picking your right one.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's getting more and more individual, definitely within camogie. I can see it now, like in terms of, like you're saying, he's using one that's probably a little bit too long. That's very, I think, specific to kind of full back line, because obviously hooking and blocking is so important. Whereas like I play the full forward line, it's probably the opposite if anything. Like a size 32 is probably a couple of inches too short for me.
Yes.
Like if I try to hit the ball on the ground, there's probably a good chance I'll fresh air it 9 times out of 10. It's just that bit short. But at the same time, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying not to get hooked, or I'm using a short grip more often than not, so it kind of suits me to have a lighter hurl that I can manoeuvre more easily, theoretically anyway.
You're a member of the Gaelic Players Association LGBTQ plus working group, and look, you've spoken very eloquently in recent past about male intercounty players especially trying to come out publicly, and we just haven't had a level of players coming out, in certainly in the male game anyway. Like, do you think we're heading in the right direction in terms of players feeling comfortable coming out and being open about that?
Yeah, look, I definitely think we're heading in the right direction. I think even the establishment to this LGBTQ plus working group by the GPA is a big step in the right direction, because, you know, you're opening the door, you're having conversations, you're creating that safe space within GAA as a wider family, where people can talk and, you know, have these discussions and hopefully eventually start to feel more welcome. Excuse me. And I think that's something that the GPA have done really well, in terms of, like, you know, we hosted a Pride breakfast this year before the parade was on over Pride weekend, and it just creates a space where, you know, allies can come down, straight people can come down, and it doesn't have to be isolated to, you know, if I go to this event, maybe people are going to assume that I'm questioning my sexuality.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes that's half the battle, is to create somewhere that everybody can come together and people can feel, you know, I'm safe, nobody's looking at me, nobody's wondering what I'm thinking, or nobody's, you know, suspicious of me or whatever it might be. So I think the GPA have done great work in that space, and I hope that it begins to kind of take off now over the next couple of years and spread throughout the GAA, and yeah, hopefully over time we can create an environment that's more welcoming.
Apart from just like speaking out, and obviously you do quite a lot of media and you talk about it, what other stuff are the working group doing to reach out to clubs and reach out to, because I suppose one side of it is that you see these people in the media, you see them represented and you think, oh, that could be me, but also that kind of getting down to people's level and like the more grassroots element of it is probably quite important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we did at the start that like I thought was, I was quite proud of, I thought was a great idea, was just to go out and do a survey. And it was of inter-county players now at the time. But, it's so hard to talk about these things when we don't have data, and you can sit here and you can hypothesise about this and hypothesise about that. But, by going out and actually asking people and, having those conversations with players, in an anonymous or confidential manner, at first say to allow people to say, well, yeah, I do know people on my team who are out or who are gay, both in the male game and the female game, then, what I learned from that first and foremost was that, there are male players who are out within their teams, which is fantastic because it means that they feel comfortable talking to their teammates and talking to their friends and their teams. But also, look, it's not anybody's obligation to come out publicly or to speak publicly about their sexuality. If they want to, fantastic. If they don't want to, that's their decision. But I do think we have to question ourselves as, an organisation and as a wider family. Is there more that we could be doing to make them feel comfortable coming out? And what are the reasons that all of those male players are choosing to keep their sexuality quiet or within their team or their friend group? And I think that, that's education basically in that way is a big piece of what we're doing. And yes, exactly as you said, the more we can gather information and educate clubs and smaller groups, then I would hope that in turn kids going up will have better experiences.
Yeah, even you mentioned the fact that stats, like we can see from surveys, and like the survey earlier this year, like those stats are mad. Like the GPS subcommittee yourselves found that 69% of female players are aware of an LGBTQ plus teammate compared to just 10% of male players. Like that's a mad divide.
Yeah. It's a huge difference, but to be honest with you, I was surprised it was 10% of male players.
Yeah, that's fair.
I kind of thought it would be lower.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's so much that we talk about that the GAA are ahead of camogie and are ahead of the LGFA, and I do think this is one of the areas where LGFA and camogie probably have a bit of an edge on the GAA. And I guess we have to look at why that is as well to be able to move forward. And there probably is an element of the GAA. Now I don't want to speak on behalf of men, but I could imagine for a lot of GAA and hurling teams, there's such an expectation and a reputation of being, this kind of stereotypically masculine and strong, and I don't think that we've opened that space to allow men to, maybe fully be their authentic selves or express themselves in that way.
And it's across sports as well. Like, it's not just a problem within the GAA. We look at rugby, football, like it's everywhere. And even I think it's a sort of situation where it's not even something that's limited to, say, if there is a high-profile GA player who comes out, that's not only going to affect just GA players, that's going to also affect like other people, like other kids that love rugby. They're still going to see someone in the paper every day and be like, he's okay talking about this. I could be okay talking about it too. And I thought it was great, like the few Leinster lads that have spoken out publicly about that. Like, I was really surprised that happened. I didn't expect it at all. But fair play to them for doing it. And if we had, as you say, no one ever has to come out, no one ever has to expose themselves in that way if they don't want to, but it would just be so great for us as a country to have that conversation a bit more in that sphere, because we do have it so much on the women's side. And it's not perfect by any means, but there's definitely more of that base there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing with the guys over in the UK playing soccer who came out, Jake Daniels and them. I think I would like to think that the support that's shown to them, and it was a vastly positive reaction that was had. There was a couple of things that were upsetting though at the time. Like, I know when Jake Daniels posted initially, the comments were turned off on the original post, which is unfortunately, it's sad to see, but I could completely understand why it was done, because you just don't want to open yourself to that negative backlash. But I guess given that level of protection that was put in, it was nice to see then that so much of the response to it was so positive, and that there was so many organisations across the UK, particularly obviously soccer clubs and stuff, who very vocally supported him and supported his decision. Because exactly as you said, you can imagine if you're a young guy playing any sport with the aspirations to play at a high level or play professionally, it has to be very comforting and reassuring to see these big organisations just step up and to publicly state, rather than saying, oh well, it's assumed, to actually make a point to saying we are supportive of this and we are an open and inclusive environment.
Because every so often you see some absolutely crazy comments, like the priest in Listowel this week coming out with comments about transgenderism and homosexuality and teenagers using condoms. Like, every so often you'll get just crazy stuff like that sets people back. But also I think the reaction has been fairly positive in its condemning of comments like that.
Yeah, and it's hard to see as well, like, you know, like, how are we still giving platforms to these people in one way? Like, it boggles the mind. And look, it's a difficult one to kind of get your head around, and it's a difficult one even to comment on, because I kind of went back and forward on it a little bit. You know, do you come out and condemn something?
Do you even talk about it?
Yeah, exactly. That's so obviously terrible. Or do you even bother giving them oxygen? Like, you know, why are we covering something that seems so archaic? But unfortunately, at the same time, it's very representative of a lot of the views of the Catholic Church, at least on paper or in theory. So we probably do have to discuss it to an extent, because, you know, you'd nearly wonder how many people are religious and attend mass every week and don't agree with, you know, the things he's saying that are maybe against abortion, or, as you said, teenagers using condoms, or whether it's homosexuality. So I guess from an awareness perspective, it's good to highlight that, and B, it's probably good to show that, you know, we've passed gay marriage referendums, and that's fantastic to be one of the first countries to pass that by popular vote. But at the same time, that doesn't fix everything. You know, that's not a we're done now, we can forget about this and move on kind of. So I think it's good to highlight that there probably is still a lot of work that needs to be done, and still people who, you know, think they can go out and preach these kind of, you know, hate speech really, and ridiculous perspectives. So finding the balance there, I guess.
Can I just ask you very finally, Aisling, just like the news that came about Adrian O'Sullivan, the Dublin camogie manager, leaving his role, announced it, I think, on social media. So he's 2 years, I think, into his 3-year contract, and like he's referenced the application of the rules as one of his reasons for stepping aside. But did this come as a surprise to yourself and the other players? Yeah,
it was a surprise. Look, you know, anybody who manages, who coaches in the GAA is giving up a huge amount of time, and you know, they're a volunteer at the end of the day. Like, they put so many hours into it. So look, it's disappointing to see somebody walk away early from a contract like that. But you know, I think it's difficult maybe for us, because we've had so much change in management in Dublin camogie, you know, over, I think I'm 10 years involved at this stage, and we've had like 8 or 9 managers in that time or something. So it's difficult to kind of break that continuity again, and from a player's perspective, I suppose that surprise kind of makes it that little bit more challenging. But at the end of the day, you know, like I said, it's a volunteer thing, and Adrian has a life and a job and a family and everything outside of that. So look, you know, I respect his decision, and if he can't commit to it and his head's not there, then you have to respect his decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair enough, absolutely. Aisling, great stuff. Thanks a million for coming in, and for settling the Hurley debate as well. I think that's fairly important.
Put to bed now.
Yeah, exactly. People just don't even comment. Don't even put it in the YouTube comments. I don't care. It's Hurl. And best of luck listening in the Leinster Championship as well with Vincent, and for the year going forward. No doubt we'll touch base again over the coming months. So a reminder, AIB, proud sponsors of both club and county, proud to launch this year's AIB Camogie Club All-Ireland Championships and the AIB GAA All-Ireland Club Championships. AIB is honoured to be entering their 10th season backing the AIB Camogie Club All-Ireland Championships and the 32nd year of supporting the AIB GAA All-Ireland Club Championships. This year we'll see AIB celebrating the toughest players of all, those who keep going and persevere no matter how tough it gets. Now, during the ad break, you'll hear our own Adrian Barry speaking with the ex-Irish Rugby international Gordon Darcy and GAA referee David Goff about the challenges faced on the field. It's brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at movember.com. Back after the break with the writer and broadcaster Craig Ray, previewing the South African side of things ahead of tomorrow's massive game against the Springboks in Dublin. See you in a sec.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB GAA.
There's Mark and Richie, and I'll never forget, as I'm staring out at the camera here, I was standing here and he was coming in at me with the ball, and he threw his famous patented dummy hand pass, because he's a big handballer, with his right hand, and I literally moved into another parish.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you ever thought about maybe one sort of slightly more creative way about going to this would be bring them inside and say, here, listen, this is how this all works, and
I've often gone to speak to intercounty teams and got them to take out their mobile phones, sign up to a URL and put a kind of a pop quiz of 10 questions on rules up on the board, put up the most obscure ones that I could possibly find and get the guys to answer, and the answers come up live on the screen, and it's hilarious. I mean, you're talking below 30% most of the time.
Really?
Yeah, and it's interesting. The majority of intercounty players playing football maybe 20, 30 years of their life have never read the rules of the game.
And then you add in the heat and the heat of an intercounty game, or like a final, or like the adrenaline and all that stuff.
In the heat of the battle, they can just lose composure sometimes, yeah, and it all gets lost.
Even just the bit that I always find, it's one of the few games where you pretty much have a friend in battle the whole way around, and if you get the guy who's in your ear, and you had a bad day, there's so much about GAA is around that sportsmanship.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
8:15 AM on this Friday morning's OTB AM, and that great chat with Aisling, you can get that in podcast as well in all the usual places. Watch it back on YouTube as well. But it is time to take a further look ahead to tomorrow's big test against the Springboks at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, 5:30. Delighted to be joined on the line this morning by Craig Ray, the South African rugby pundit. Morning, Craig, how are things?
Hi Shane, good and you?
Absolutely, keeping well. A little bit nervous for tomorrow. We had our own South African Stephen Kispy-Green in the studio with us yesterday, and he was saying South Africa by 6, so he's really set the bar now for South Africa and made Ireland underdogs. Are you gonna do the same with us this morning? Are you gonna really push it?
No way Ireland are underdogs in this one. The Springboks have been too inconsistent and erratic this season. I mean, they're good enough to beat Ireland, but they also, Ireland are good enough to beat the Springboks. So I know that sounds like fence sitting, but with the home ground advantage, I think a fit Johnny Sexton. I see Hugo Keenan did make it through. I heard there was an injury card earlier about Hugo Keenan. So I just think the Irish pack is good enough to at least neutralise the Springbok pack. And with Sexton pushing them around the park, I think they have to start as favourites. But it's going to be narrow. I don't think it's going to be 38-3 or whatever it was in 2017.
How much, Craig, do we read into the result of this game either way? It remains to be seen what the score will be, but in terms of the fact that we're in the same World Cup pool, is there an element of shadow boxing about this match, or is it a case of, look, that's far into the future, not that far into the future, but there's an element of just get this game over with and then focus on the World Cup, or how do you see that element of it?
Yeah, I think both sides want to win, right? It's a massive test. I don't think it's about world ranking. I really don't think that anyone's thinking about who's going to be number one at the end of this year. And there is, I think, a psychological blow to be landed here, especially if the Springboks win in Dublin. That they haven't done that since 2012. Okay, they've only played 2 more times in 2014 and 17, but still, it would be a big blow because it would sit at the back of the mind. I mean, if you go back to 2018 and 19, the Springboks made it a priority to beat the All Blacks in New Zealand for no other reason than to build their own self-belief. And I think that will be the same case here. If they can beat Ireland in Dublin, then there's no reason why they can't beat Ireland in France next year.
I remember the comments from the infamous comments from Jake White before the tests in November 2004. Not one single Irish player would make the South African starting 15, and then of course that's 3 days before the Irish team went on to win that game. If you look at the matchups on the field, how dominant do you think either side can be in terms of areas of the pitch? Because we've got the teams now, so it's an element of matchups and I guess seeing where. If you're from a South African perspective, where on the Irish team are you targeting?
Well, Josh van der Flier, I mean, if you can neutralise him or at least reduce his influence on the game around the breakdown, then you're gonna have a better afternoon, aren't you? Their line-out, James Ryan, Tyke Byrne, I mean, fantastic. So when you look at those packs, there's very little in it, and it's going to be a case of maybe just winning 1 or 2 moments, poaching a line out here, winning a breakdown there, and I think that's going to be the real key battle, as it usually is. I'm not sure what the weather's going to be tomorrow, but in my experience of going to Dublin about 5 times for matches, it's never dry. Yes. So the Springbok back three is quite interesting with Cheslin Kolbe, Kurtley Orange. Okay, Makazole Mapimpi is established there. But, Kolbe and Orange are steppers and runners. And it's quite curious how the Springboks are going to deploy them tomorrow in what is likely to be difficult conditions with Johnny Sexton and Conor Murray raining down bombs on them. Not that those guys can't handle it. So I think the little matchups are how Kolbe and Orange in particular handle the aerial onslaught, how the Springboks can neutralise Van der Flier and Omani over the ball, and in the lineouts whether De Jager and Etzebeth can poach a couple from Ryan and Byrne. So, the scrums, again, the Springboks pride themselves in that area of the game. They're probably starting with their strongest front row with Malherbe, Kutsoff and Marks. Although there is a theory that Bongi and Benambi is a better scrummager than Malcolm Marks, but of course Marks brings breakdown energy as well. So it's really, it's a long waffle, I suppose, but it's very difficult to see. So I think it's going to come down to those key areas that it always does and who just manages it better on the day. One or two moments can change this game. And of course, we always have the other factor, TMOs and referees and interpretations, which you never know how it's going to go.
Do you think this match would have a different psychological impact on either side if it was coming towards the end of the series rather than at the start? Because it kind of feels like everyone's bringing it up and talking about it as like the matchup as for both teams. But the fact that it's like the first match, there's still other ones coming. I think it's Fiji and then Australia for us. Is there enough space there for, I suppose, teams to limit the psychological impact? If, say, Ireland do lose tomorrow, is there enough space there for them to say, okay, right, regroup, let's go on, or the same for South Africa?
Yeah, I think Ireland haven't been together in quite a while, since July, whereas the Springboks have had a whole rugby championship. So Ireland definitely probably starting a little rustier than the Springboks in this one. So yeah, they might look at it that way. Well, if they lose this one, it's how they develop through the autumn internationals. From the Springbok point of view, their stated goal has been to win all the tests on this tour. So to achieve that, of course, you have to beat Ireland. So it will be a setback if they don't win. They've never said it's going to be easy or they expect to win or anything like that, but their goal, and it has to be, is to win 4 out of 4 on this tour. And it's a tough tour. You've got France to come and England at the end of it, outside of the World Rugby window, so they won't be at full strength for that match. So, I think if they're going to lose one, or if the one that would be acceptable to lose, it would be to England at the end of it because of what I've just pointed out. So I think the Springboks have put a lot of eggs in this basket, and the fact that they've gone absolutely full strength for this, with a couple of tweaks with Kolbe at fullback, which is, I think it's a Ninabe Erasmus plan that maybe we don't quite fully understand yet. It tells you everything you need to know. The Springbok side has been set up with the best possible opportunity to win this match.
You mentioned Kolbe at fullback there, Craig, for the first time, and I know his previous 20 caps have come on the wing, so and yet it's been mooted that this might happen for quite some time, and of course it gives Curtly Arons, the Bulls player, a bit of a chance to push on in the right wing. I mean, was there surprise at this decision to play Cheslin Kolbe at fullback, or has it been received, I guess, with no surprise in South Africa as something that has been kind of coming down the pipeline a bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, he started his career as a fullback at the Stormers in Western Province. He's played a lot of fullback in France in club rugby. And in the modern game, the fullbacks and the wings are quite interchangeable in many ways, especially defensively, where one falls back to take the high ball and or support each other. So I think we will see a lot of the switching. And also, I think it's a message it's sending is Curtly Arons has done enough to keep that right wing place. And Cheslin Kolbe has got to fight for it. And this is probably his way back to fight for it. So, I think it says a lot about Arons' performances. And I don't know how many of your viewers would have watched his performance against the All Blacks in Nelspruit in the Rugby Championship. It was one of the exceptional performances of the season. And, he gets off the ground, he gets high off the ground, even though he's not a huge man. So dealing with aerial threat is not really a problem because he's so explosive and he's got great feet. But again, those were very different conditions, good weather to use your feet and to move. So they're going to face a different challenge. But I think it's also part of the Springbok strategy is to expose these guys to what they might experience in September and October in France next year.
We saw the South African team up on screen for our viewers there a moment ago, but when you look at that centre partnership as well, Damien de Allende is a player a lot of people in Ireland will know from his time with Munster, and Jesse Creel as well is an interesting one. That centre partnership is fairly intimidating from an Irish perspective.
Yeah, look, Jesse Creel is not Lucanio Am on attack. I think we can all accept that. Lucanio Am is missed in the side, but it's interesting that in the 40-odd tests since Ninabe and Erasmus returned in 2018, either Creel or Am has started at fullback out of all of them bar one. So started at outside centres, all of them bar one, which was against Canada at the World Cup when De Lende started there. So, Creel's got a lot of experience. He's the general on defence. He will marshal the defence. He's a physical guy. He's pretty quick. He doesn't have the subtle hands or the feet of Lucanio Am, but he is there to shore up the defence for the Springboks. And I guess what we know is going to be a tight test match, that's priority number one. And De Lende, he's got good hands and a great pass of the ball, but you don't see that a lot in the Springbok setup. But the Boks have actually evolved their game a little bit this season. They've certainly looked to move the ball a lot more. They haven't always been accurate or clinical, but even the games they lost to Australia, they spent an inordinate amount of time in Australia's red zone and couldn't put it away. And it's something they've been working towards. And a big factor in that, of course, is the influence of Damian Willemse, who's come in and done so well this season. He's such a playmaker. Now he's moved to 10. He started the season at fullback, played 12, 13. And, that's going to be an interesting matchup too, because I don't think the Irish have really seen Damian Willemse in this kind of form and confidence. And it will be interesting to see how he approaches this game because, of course, it's going to be a tactical battle in probably wet conditions. But he's also the kind of guy that is always looking for the opportunity to attack, which is maybe not what we've become used to in the Springbok DNA over the last 2 seasons.
Do you think it's quite... we often talk in media about the size of the South African pack and the size of the South African team generally and the bomb squad and the customary but intimidating 6-2 split on the bench as well, Craig. Like, is it almost at a point where it's lazy that we just kind of pigeonhole South Africa as they're just this big physical team? They have other attributes, but that seems to be the one that we all zone in on before the game's against them.
Oh, look, there's no getting away that they're physical. Big's really, the Irish side's big. Actually, the Springbok side, when they do pack weights, they're often lighter than their opposition. Big, that doesn't really matter. They're all big, aren't they? Anyone who stands 6'7" or whatever, they're big people. Where the Springboks do probably, people don't see them as ball players. But if you've watched Eben Etzebeth's form, Loot de Jager's form this season, the two of them been running off shoulders, taking short passes, getting through holes, popping passes. There's definitely a change, and it's not always that accurate, but there's definitely a switch in the way the Springboks are playing. You might not see too much of that tomorrow. The conditions might dictate something else, but there's certainly they're better ball players than you probably give them credit for. And among that 6-2 split, the bomb squad, in fact, they've got 2 small sticks of dynamite in Dion Fourie and Kocher Smith among the forwards. Both those guys are under 6 foot tall, and they're just dynamic, explosive runners and hard on the ground. So the Springbok game plan, you can see in the final quarter, is to dominate the breakdown battles, to dominate the carry with those 2 explosive runners. And so it's going to be an interesting last 20, I think, in this match.
Do you think that slight change towards, not even moving away from the physical, but I suppose giving South Africa that extra element when it comes to the runners and stuff, is that in preparation for the World Cup, where they're kind of starting to bring it into the game now in the hope that when the World Cup does roll around, they have something extra that will push them through to the final?
Yeah, they had to evolve their game, didn't they? You can't go 4 years of kicking and mauling and expect that opposition aren't going to find ways around it. So they've had to grow their game, and that was always part of the plan. I suppose you remember they all missed 2020 as well because the Springboks did not play a match during the height of COVID. So their development took a setback. I think the idea was to use 2020 as a real growth season with the view to the British and Irish Lions. But then, of course, they didn't play. 2021 came. It was all about just beating the Lions. We have to beat them. It doesn't matter how. And we won't go into that because we all know what happened there with Rassie Erasmus. And so once that was done, then they could start going, okay, well, let's try and add some layers. And we saw some of that in last year's Rugby Championship. I don't know if you remember, Lucanio Am's beautiful around the back pass to set up their Lender's try. And we've seen a lot more of that. They'd probably be a bit further along the line in this sort of change of tack had they had the extra season. And yes, France obviously they're playing a few games down in Marseille. Even in September, October, the conditions are likely to be quite conducive to good ball-in-hand rugby. So I think the Springboks are certainly trying to round their game and not just be a one-trick pony, because people have caught up, people have caught on, and are matching them in that aspect of the game. So they need to find something else.
Some nice comments coming in on the YouTube channel, Craig. People praising your analysis. I think the Irish are sweetening you up ahead of the match tomorrow. A comment from a South African as well. Bach pack is smaller than the French and English and sometimes New Zealand. People overstate our size in the pack, says LB on YouTube. Finally, Craig, I don't know what you make of the jersey situation. I don't know if you've heard the bit of a controversy over here in terms of the similarity in the jerseys for the game. Could cause absolute carnage.
I heard it, but I thought someone would have to wear white, surely, or some whatever.
You imagine so.
Well, I don't know if the Springboks have packed their alternative jerseys with them, but I hope sense prevails, because that would be height of amateur if they both go out there looking almost identical. And we've seen that so many times, certainly in the Super Rugby days, we saw that, and it used to drive me nuts. And, it just shouldn't be happening at this level. So hopefully sense prevails. I mean, traditionally, the home side in rugby wears their away strip when there's a clash, don't they? So that's always been sort of rugby's way of doing it, where it obviously works the other way in football. I don't really mind who wears what, just as long as it doesn't clash.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as you say, hopefully sense does prevail. Craig, score prediction, or who's going to win and by how much?
I'm going to go with my heart on this one, not fully with my head. I think Springboks are desperate enough, and when they're on, they're good enough to beat anyone in the world. And I don't know if they're going to be on tomorrow, so I'm going to give them a win by something around 23-19, 23-20, something like that.
Right, okay. So the two South Africans we've had on this week so far both predicted a Springbok win.
Shocking that.
Oh, what a surprise there.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, listen, enjoy the match. Thanks a million for your time as always at OTB AM.
Thanks a lot. It was nice to be on. Thanks, Shane Kathleen.
That is Craig Ray, the broadcaster, writer and South African rugby pundit. Great stuff from him as always. Right, a reminder that Braeburn Coffee, I better not damage my microphone when I do it. I love the coffee so much that I'm going to damage the mic to show it off. Is the official coffee partner of OTB, is Braeburn Coffee. Each week we're giving one lucky viewer a €100 voucher to spend on some Braeburn Coffee goodness at an Applegreen store near you. To enter, check out @OffTheBall on Twitter. Just like and retweet our Braeburn competition post and you are in the draw. Braeburn Coffee never compromises on quality or taste to give you the best on the go coffee experience on the road. Available at Applegreen today. Now, Kathleen, this news broke yesterday. UEFA's new competition proposed for the International Women's Game. So, we had a infamous moment in Off the Ball when Kevin Kilbane tried to describe the permutations when the UEFA Nations League came through for the men's game. So, what is going on here, and what will it mean for the Republic of Ireland, most importantly?
Well, it's not the best news for the Republic of Ireland.
Right.
Starting out.
That's a bad start, okay.
No, it's not a good start. It's essentially the exact same setup as the men's. There's not really any difference. We're going to be in League B, so we're going to be in the middle of everything, which Vera Pauw has been very, very adamant since this whole idea was put forward that she didn't want a Nations League. She didn't want to be in League B. Her whole thing is that if you're in League A, you already have the money, and if you're in League C, you're going to get the funding and you're going to get the extra cash to kind of progress you. So where does that leave us in the middle? It's almost kind of like the middle child of the whole thing. And it's really interesting, this was not expected to come so soon. It had been talked about, but everyone kind of expected it was going to come for a while, because FIFA has been planning this massive global calendar for women's sport for women's football for a while now, and that is still only at the consultation phase, I think. So everyone was like, why is UEFA coming out with this major change to its qualification process for the Euros and the World Cup and the Olympics ahead of FIFA trying to organise the calendar? It's going to really increase the amount of games international teams have to play. I think max we would have had to play to get to the World Cup, say, was 12 if we had gone to the playoffs in February. In the end, we played 10. Under this new system, we'll have to play 18 games to qualify. So that 8 games extra is quite a lot in a year. And I saw Tom Gary in the Telegraph. He had a piece saying that major clubs and leagues around Europe were really annoyed about this announcement yesterday. They didn't know it was coming. They had already messaged or emailed UEFA, whatever it was, to express that they were really worried about players being burned out because of this new system. I do understand some of the benefits of bringing it in the sense, you look at England beating Latvia 20-0. that sort of stuff shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't have those sort of scorelines. You shouldn't have England. I think they qualified for the World Cup with 80 goals in 10 matches. So that's like an average of 8 goals a match. You don't want that sort of matchups happening. But there is also the other side of, well, like take the Irish example. Vera Pauw has consistently said we've got to where we are because we played teams like Australia and Sweden and we put ourselves up against that. Is this system going to limit that a little bit, and is that going to then limit the quality that we're able to achieve? Because if you're adding 8 extra qualifying games, there's not going to be as much space there as well for players to play internationals. There's not going to be as much space for them to do like international friendlies or like camps or whatever it might be. So I have a lot of question marks around it. Right. I don't think it was all that well laid out by UEFA, and the fact that it seems to have taken everyone by surprise. I don't know if it's going to get that much buy-in. I know people don't really have a choice. Like, it's there now. We're going to have to deal with it. But just in terms of, I always think with the women's game, like, we've seen all the issues on the men's side. We've seen all the ways it's gone in terms of like your PSGs with their money, or whether it's like the international schedule with the World Cup this year and managers complaining about burnout constantly. There's such a good opportunity and a clean slate on the women's side to avoid all those issues. And instead they just seem to kind of be following the same pattern. And it's quite frustrating to watch from the outside, because you're like, well, why do we want to put players at risk of burnout? Like, say even Vivian Miedema, it was announced this week, is not going to this international camp, and Arsenal are also giving her a break from the club because she hasn't had a break in so long between international tournaments and club football. And those are players that are playing a lot less matches than, say, someone in the Premier League. So what does this new schedule say about that?
Yeah. And like, Vera Pauw didn't hide her opposition to it in before this was even confirmed. Like, she went as far as saying this is detrimental to the women's game. So when you're hearing comments like that, you're like, well, why are we pressing ahead with this? Yeah, and I do understand it. Like, I follow quite a lot of the English journalists, and they were talking about it from the perspective of, you know, a big footballing nation like England just won the Euros, and they were a lot more positive about it. And I was talking to a couple of them about the Irish side of it, and they were kind of like, oh, we never even considered that. We just saw these massive score lines and thought, well, something needs to change. And I've said for a long time that something needs to change. I don't deny that, but I've always been cautious about the Nations League format, because I do think it leaves countries who are kind of in the middle in a really rough place, and it just makes qualifications so much harder for international tournaments as well. And if you're the sort of country that is at that sort of like middle stage, so say Ireland are at, like, we can't say we're at the top, we can't say we're at the bottom, we are at a middle stage. Yes. But we want to progress on. How are we supposed to do that under this new structure? How are we supposed to push into the higher one? Because it's going to be so hard to get up there. And the way you push on in the current format is you make it to international tournaments, you make it to World Cups or Euros. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to hearing what Vera Pauw has to say about it. Well, I think they're going into camp on Monday, and then they're playing Morocco in a friendly on the 14th. So I'm sure at some stage next week we'll hear her thoughts on it quite extensively. Like, I wonder, I know there was so much opposition when a lot of opposition when the Nations League was mooted first for the men's game, and then people kind of slowly maybe came around to it, and they're like, well, this is better than friendlies. But as you say, that's a lot more games in the year. Like, yeah, and it's different as well on the women's side, because like the friendlies are only really starting to mean something, and they're only really starting to like attract as much attention as they probably already had on the men's side. You know, we've talked about it so much ahead of the World Cup next year. We'd love to see England or someone of that ilk come over here and have that big, massive friendly. We've never really had that level of a friendly here. And it's not something anyone has actually really been crying out for all that much. And I think if it was like 2 or 3 extra games in a year, you'd be like, okay, that's fair enough. It's just the fact that it could be up to 8. Like, that's a lot of extra playing time, even when you take in friendly windows. So yeah, I
I'm very skeptical of how it's going to play out, because I think if the only benefit to this is that we're not having score lines of 20-0, then that's not really a good enough reason to do it.
You've filled me with pessimism for the Nations League.
I'm sorry, Shane. I feel like I do this every time we're on air together.
Happy Friday, folks. Enjoy the Women's Nations League. And finally, Kathleen, on that, just Shelbourne playing Athlone on Sunday in the Cup final at 3 o'clock. We've previewed the game with Alex Cavan, the Shelbourne player, on the show this week, and looked ahead a bit. And Shelbourne, of course, looking to complete a double, but should be a good game. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think Athlone have been so interesting this season. They're very much the dark horse of the year, and they're difficult to play against. They're one of those, like, Shelbourne definitely have the better squad, but the thing that Athlone do really well is they're tricky to play against. They put themselves in awkward positions. They're very much a bodies on the line sort of team, so I think it's going to be good. Shelbourne have also been, I know Alex Cavan said they hadn't been celebrating all that much, but there is always that slight, you just won the league. There's a bit of a come down from that as well when you're not able to properly, even if you haven't partied, just not just in your psychological state. Because you've aimed for something all season, and obviously it came down to the final day as well, so it wasn't like they had a bit of a run into the whole thing. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for Athlone to do something really interesting at the weekend, and I'd love to see it just for the team itself, because I think it's really important for the league that we do have these sort of, we're going into the final weekend of the league, say, with 3 teams in contention. We go to the Cup and there's one of the big teams, and then there's someone else from somewhere else around the country who isn't known for getting to these places. So I'm not saying I'm up for Athlone, but I'm optimistic for a good game. Yeah, you're not saying that either. Great stuff. Mullaney has joined us. I feel surrounded by Sligo people now. And you love it, Shane. Oh, this is great. Look at this. Sligo either side. Fantastic. When do you see this? Cal, good morning. How's it going? Are you all well? Keeping well. Good. It's, the dream is over. The Irish cricket dream is over. Yeah, it was disappointing this morning. New Zealand played it really well. Ireland started the chase quite well, but then it kind of unravelled slightly. But it's been a great tournament. That win over England will live long in the memory. We'll always have that. We'll always have that. And disappointing that I think the Afghanistan game, no play in that match, and then the 3 other matches, fairly hefty losses. But look, all in all, quite a successful campaign for Ireland to win that game against England. Just in terms of the exposure for the sport, I think that win over England will do a lot in terms of promotion of the game in the country and beyond as well, and underlines Ireland's status among the nations in the world that's operating at a decent level, at T20 level. And looking forward, I think Ireland, along with England and Scotland, potentially hosting the 2030 tournament. There's talk that there might be a new national stadium for Ireland cricketers in the coming years as well. So all in all, you would hope it all that kind of feeds into that positivity heading forward, but there's still lots of work to be done in terms of that stadium, and if that could be developed, you would think it would secure the long-term future of the game and obviously grow the game here in Ireland as well. And we've shown already that we can be very, very competitive. Do you think cricket can become mainstream in Ireland? Like it's on the periphery a little bit at the minute, but then you see results like this and everyone, the whole country gets involved because it's a big moment and it's sport, and Irish people love their sport. Yeah, it's hard to know. Obviously Gaelic games and soccer and rugby are the 3 main ones, but it's amazing when you delve into the details of cricket worldwide just how many people play the sport and watch the sport. I was surprised reading up on it as Ireland were playing this campaign, just how many people across the world actually watch cricket. And obviously it's a big part of Sky Sports offering at the moment as well. Probably when you don't come from that background, you only clue into it when Ireland are doing well maybe, or playing in the bigger tournaments. To become mainstream, there's probably a lot of work to be done in that regard to spread it around the country. But I think the development of a new national stadium will be a big boost for them. The women's team are currently playing this morning as well in Pakistan. It's their first tour of any Irish senior side, I think, of Pakistan. So that's obviously a huge positive as well. And it is growing, but to become mainstream might be a stretch in the medium term, but certainly in the longer term, it's a goal to aspire to, I would think. I'm looking forward to the Premier League action this weekend. Tottenham Liverpool, of course, the big one on Sunday at 4:30. I'm actually heading over to Villa Park on Sunday for Aston Villa against Manchester United, and I booked this a long time ago, so Steven Gerrard was the manager at the time. Clearly now it's Unai Emery's first game in charge. United coming in with a bit of confidence. I chose Villa Park because I was like, right, I'm going to try and go through my bucket list of Premier League stadiums. Craven Cottage is up there as well. Do either of you have, I'm putting you both in the spot here, but stadiums or stadia, I don't know what the correct term is, that you would like to to visit and see a match? Because like we all have these, this idea of getting to the Maracana or whatever. But do you have anywhere on
Are
your
we
list?
talking specifically football or any sport?
Any sport.
I've always wanted to do like the rugby ones. Like I'd love to go down to New Zealand and see an All Blacks game, or else, to be honest, Cardiff for like a Six Nations game.
course.
I've never been, and I've wanted to go for so long. I was supposed to go 2020, so like when COVID hit. I just think like close roof, hear the anthems, see the lights. I think the main reason for that is because my first proper like sporting, not even memory, but I suppose one of the times where I properly got that moment in my heart was watching Cardiff 2009, and just like seeing the commentary, the atmosphere. It was just, it's still one of the standout moments in my head, and I think that's why I have that emotional tie to it, because it's probably why I got so into sport. That was probably the like little key moment for me,
Right.
which is quite late on when you consider it, but before that I was very much just a sofa fan.
Colin has said Sellers Park is amazing. Glad All Over is a belter of a tune, belter in block capitals. For you, Cathal, you look, it's all about atmosphere, isn't it? Because I look at, and even character, I look at the reason I want to go to Craven Cottage is because of, the stanchions covering, blocking your view. It's real old, kind of old school stadium.
Yeah,
like
I think Spurs Stadium
yes
will be one, and that's quite accessible, I think, to get to. It looks fantastic.
I've heard the atmosphere around it's like bad in the sense that the fans are just not very nice.
NFL London I saw over there.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a football match, so maybe the atmosphere is totally different. But the great stadium, you could smell, as I said, the fresh paint off it. But like, you do need a bit of atmosphere.
You do, and it's funny, we were just talking about that, and there's been commentary again this week about Ireland South Africa tomorrow at the Aviva Stadium and the lack or thereof of atmosphere at the Aviva Stadium. Over the years at different sporting fixtures, it's hard to get right because you've got to have a match day experience for fans and maybe people that aren't overly interested in the match itself, but you want to try and draw them into the sport somehow by offering a good fan experience, and you've got to marry that then with the fans that want to solely focus on the match. And I think the IRFU are going to do some surveys around the 3 November internationals to try and glean some information from the people attending in terms of what they want. I think the Irish Times, and Jerry Thornley has written about this of late, that there was one incident where one supporter said they had to get up 73 times in a match to let people in by them because they were going out to get drinks during the match.
Jesus.
So you've got to try and marry the two experiences, whether it's a case of at these venues that you keep the bars closed during the match themselves, whether you keep the bars open but people can't bring their drinks back to their seats, they'd have to drink in the concourse, and therefore people that are watching in their seats have an uninterrupted view of the match throughout the course of the first half. Then you can take your break at half time and back in again for the second half. Another thing at venues, I think, is the use of phones.
Yeah.
And for me, I think
old man Cathal about to go off on a rant here. Yells at cloud.
You mentioned venues. You mentioned venues. Obviously, I play a bit of golf, and Augusta, obviously, the place that I'd love to visit. But I think there's a rule there that you can't bring your phone on the course,
right?
And that if you're seen with a phone, you'll be thrown out.
Love that.
So you're living in the moment.
Love that.
Yeah.
See the famous photographs of Tiger Woods teeing off at events, and everyone's just like, and then there's always that one little old person watching and taking it all in with their eyes.
Yeah, I was actually chatting to someone about this in the last few days about filming things on your phone at a match.
Pointless.
How good is the footage you're going to get?
It's just to prove on social media. Look at me, I was there.
Exactly. Like, I don't think you're going to get.
Here's me talking. I will definitely take a video from Villa Park. Press box on
I was going to say, I can't wait for your Instagram story to go
I'm going to
up.
be that dose. Sorry.
Yeah.
I really hope the Sky camera catches you at some stage and you're just there on your phone.
I get the best angle. Yeah.
I don't think it's about though I do agree largely with the point you're both making, but I don't think it's actually about the footage that you're taking. It's that sort of thing of you're scrolling through your phone and you see a photo of a match you're at, you see a video or something, and you're like, oh God, that was a great day, or that was a terrible day, depending on the result.
Yeah.
I think there's that element to it as well. Like I do agree that there definitely should be less people on their phones at matches, and whenever, say, there's like a free kick or something and literally everyone around you is on their phone, I don't agree with that so much. But
I was actually in the Stretford End singing section for a match last year. It was the United Villarreal game when Ronaldo scored that last minute winner. I think that was the game. And literally, there's a sign just before you enter into that area of the stadium, and it says no phones. And like, they're serious about it, because I came out, I hadn't seen this in advance, but came out then and I was just taking a little video, and the guy behind me tapped me on the shoulder, said, "Mate, no phones." And I was like, "Oh, apologies." I actually panicked, and I was like, "Oh, it's for my mum. It's for my mum. I'm just taking a video for my mum at home and sending it back to her because she doesn't know I'm here." Panicked, pure panic. We've got some comments in on this as well. Centre court Wimbledon for me, says Jim Sullivan. You've been to Wimbledon, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Centre court, Wimbledon, Andy Murray. That's what you want. It's insane. Like, I remember one evening I was leaving Wimbledon, and you go to like kind of basically go into the housing that's nearby to try and get an Uber to get out, and I was standing on top of a hill overlooking Wimbledon, and it was dark, the lights were on, Andy Murray was playing, and you could hear it, like it was reverberating around the entirety of Wimbledon. It was so class. Because centre court is a very strange atmosphere anyways. Like, I've never been in a sporting event like it. You're sitting there, it's dead silent, and then play stops, and you just hear like champagne corks being popped all around the place, because you can just bring in a full bottle of champagne with you, like they sell them right outside, and there's just people chatting, and then play starts.
You bring it to your seat, like,
yeah. Well, because it's a tennis crowd, I don't think they're as worried about someone throwing a glass
it's great,
bottle.
but it's bizarre.
Yeah, but it's just so strange whenever the play stops, and it's just like pop, pop, pop around the whole.
Colm says our producer Kevin Bridges didn't allow any phones. Extremely strict about it. Good to see it. Good to see it. Soccer fans keeping away from going to the stadiums, says LB. Sharks have a great stadium. They have a pool and playground next to the pitch for kids. Someone else has commented regarding drinking in stadiums. There was also that incident in Cardiff last November when a child got vomited on. Yeah, that was a famous, infamous incident. You don't want to see that. Munster hurling final in Thurles. No fake atmosphere created, just atmosphere created by fans and what's going on the pitch. Love that. Yeah, I've never been to a Munster hurling final. I spoke to, of course, there's the Ulster football final in Clonus, the home of football as well.
Been to many of them myself as well.
Unbelievable. Walking up the hill in the sun. And I spoke to Gavin White, the Kerry player, was in with me on last Saturday, and even before we came on air, we were talking about that Monaghan-Kerry Super 8s game in 2018 when Clifford scored the last minute goal to equalise, and the atmosphere, he said the atmosphere that day was unlike any he'd experienced at that point, and that was his first year. So just what's Markievicz Park like for atmosphere on a hot, sunny championship afternoon?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's been a while since there's been a big championship game.
I thought you were going to say until there was a hot sunny afternoon in Sligo. All my memories of being in Markievicz Park are like it's lashing rain.
In the west,
there were some really good days back in the noughties. I can remember one of the first games I remember going to there was, I think it was 2004, Sligo played Roscommon and it went extra time. But Shane Curran Cake, who published a book in the last couple of years, was in goal for Roscommon that day, and Sligo and Roscommon played out a draw. I think it was a replay actually, and it went to extra time. But that was the first time a goalkeeper had come out of goals, and he scored 1-1. He scored a penalty. He had to try and save a penalty. I think Paul Taylor scored a penalty on it for Sligo, and then he scored an unbelievable free from the sideline. I'm not sure is there footage of it.
Great things come out of Connacht / Sligo.
Cake is one of the great characters, and a bloody good goalkeeper as well. But it's funny you mentioned Thurles. I've been to Thurles. Actually, when the stadium was empty I think it was during COVID at some stage, and still, like, it's just such an iconic venue,
hallowed ground.
Yeah, it just has that feel to it. I suppose it is kind of old-fashioned in a sense, and I think they have plans to improve it, and they have done in recent years as well with some of the stands and stuff. But it just has such a history to it, I think, and obviously the GA was founded in Thurles as well. So
keep the comments coming in, folks. Let us know where your stadium bucket list is. By the way, I've got my press pass ticket for Villa United. My brother Dara is desperately looking for a ticket. Any Aston Villa fans or United fans out there, give us a hand. Give us a hand. Just one ticket for anywhere. I've tried Ger, the Villa fan in the house.
I was going to say the main man himself.
Yeah, tough one to get for because it's United and also Unai Emery's first game, so understandable. He's going to fly over anyway and
hopefully
cross the fingers and hopefully get something on the day.
So it'll still be good enough atmosphere just around the place as well.
Until the game kicks off and he's sitting by himself in a pub in Birmingham. No, I'm sure it'll be good crack anyway. Cal, what else is happening this morning?
Well, just to update the Irish women's cricket team, we mentioned they're in action against Pakistan in the first of their one-day internationals. Pakistan posting a total of 335 from their 50 overs. Ireland currently 17 without loss after 4 overs there in Lahore, and we mentioned the men's team exiting the T20 Cricket World Cup in Australia earlier with a defeat to New Zealand, chasing a target of 186. Ireland only managed 150 in response, though it did feature a hat-trick of wickets in the 19th over for Josh Little, and a really impressive bowling performance there from him. Shamrock Rovers' Conference League campaign concluded last night with a 1-0 loss to Djurgården in Sweden. The Swedish club topped Group F. The Hoops ended in bottom without a win after their 6 matches. West Ham beat FC SB 3-0 in Group B to finish top, and Conor Coventry, the Republic of Ireland under-21 international, played 90 minutes there for the Hammers. Manchester United heading into the playoff round to reach the last 16 of the Europa League. Alejandro Garnacho was on the mark in their 1-0 win over Real Sociedad last night, but Sociedad top Group B, so United finished second. They face a 2-legged playoff in the new year to prolong their interest in the competition, and some potentially tricky ties there. Barcelona, Juventus among the teams dropping down from the Champions League. It's more straightforward for Arsenal. They top Group A after a 1-0 defeat of Zurich at the Emirates. The SSE Electricity League First Division playoff final takes place tonight. Galway United take on Waterford at Markets Field, where Kickoff is at 7:45, and the winner will face UCD for a place in the Premier Division next season. In rugby, scrum half Craig Casey captains Ireland A in their clash with the All Blacks tonight. Kick off for that one at the RDS, also at 7:45. Decent All Blacks side name for that one too. Seamus Power gets his second round at the PGA Tour's Worldwide Technology Championship underway from 4 under par today. He shot 67 yesterday. He's 5 shots off the lead. Will Gordon is 1 shot ahead of the chasing pack there on 9 under par. Stephanie Meadow, meanwhile, on the LPGA Tour in action at the Toto Japan Classics. She's on 2 over par after her second round. She posted a second successive 73 this morning. Momoko Ueda is the leader there on 10 under par. And in racing, finally, 7 races at Down Royal today from 12:20, and the first of 8 races at Dundalk off at 5 o'clock this evening.
Carl Mullaney, great stuff as always. Thanks a million.
Thanks, folks. Have a good weekend.
Absolutely. Same to yourself at 8:55 a.m. on this Friday morning on OTB AM, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Excuse me, effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Alan Quinlan, good morning.
Morning, guys. How are you?
Keeping well, keeping well. We've had our own Stephen Kisby-Green on the show this week, a Springbok fan, predicting a 6-point win, I think, for South Africa tomorrow. We had Craig Ray on this morning, and he says maybe South Africa by 3 or 4 points. He went with his heart. This is brilliant. We can have the South Africans playing themselves up all day long.
Yeah, they're probably entitled to, Shane, given where, what they've done the last 2 years. They've been pretty consistent. They're a side that still find a way to win, even when they don't play that well in certain games. They can kind of squeeze the life out of the opposition, and they just have that power, that brilliance in the backfield as well. That if you kick poorly to them, if you give their back 3 time and space, they can really hurt you. So, yeah, it's hard to. People are asking me about predictions for this game. You don't know. Ireland are kind of coming into this a little bit cold. Short preparation time, and you would hope they'd hit the ground running. South Africa have, obviously come off the back of a rugby championship. It's the end of the season for them, really. So with their internationals, but all their players now are playing in the URC. So it's different for them nowadays. They're not tired at the end of this year, but it's been a busy summer for them. But they're very, very powerful. They lost 2 games, one to New Zealand at home in the rugby championship, and one in Australia. And by their own admission, I think they didn't start those games well. So Ireland have got to start well tomorrow, and probably rightly so. I'm not sure what the bookies are making it. Certainly, South Africa are probably slight favourites.
What do you make of the Irish starting team? Robert Balakoon coming in is a great one. We had Jack McGrath on the show yesterday, full of praise for him.
Yeah, I would have. Adrian asked me for a team a couple of weeks ago, and I got them all right except Conor Murray starting at scrum half, because we presume Gibson Park would have been back, and I was picking Balakoon on the wing when we kind of heard that James Lowe wasn't going to be available. I think he's an incredibly exciting player. He's been around a couple of years now. He's not a young fella. He's 25, but I think he's matured a lot. I think he's physicality of his game has improved a lot. His kick chase is good. He's obviously a big, tall man, and his biggest asset is that electric pace, but there's more. You've got to have more to your game than that. It has to be an all-round game, and I think he's a super exciting player with incredible speed. But he's up against 2 wingers tomorrow in Aransa and Mapimpi, who are very, very good players and very, very dangerous players. And Aransa is incredibly elusive, and obviously Cheslin Kolbe at full back. So, he might get many opportunities tomorrow, but he's got to do the kick chase stuff, the defending well, get the decision making right around your defence, because that back three are going to test Ireland, and they're going to kick as well. He's going to have a lot of kick receipts, but he's a brilliant player, and I think it's a great call from Andy Farrell.
If you were to pick out an area of the South Africa side that you mentioned, like the back three there, that you're most worried about that Ireland won't be able to cope with, what would that be?
It would probably be their forwards, Kathleen. Look, I think everybody knows they're a very physical side, and they bring a real intensity to their game. And I think under Jack Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus, they've really zoned in and focused in on getting really super fit. Their conditioning and being really relentless when they're trying to grind down the opposition. Since those two guys have taken over, they've obviously turned everything around. They've won test matches in New Zealand. They've won a World Cup, Rugby Championship, and they've got real momentum. And I think they're maximising this group of players and getting the best out of them. Sometimes the game they play is not that flashy, but for any coaches who had a forward pack, and it's not just the 8 players, it's the options off the bench, and they're always going to be traditionally big physical players, the South Africans, but I think they can play rugby as well, and but they play to their strengths. And so I think their biggest strength, Kathleen, is up front. Obviously Cheslin Kolbe at full back, he can do stuff out of nothing, and when you have a kick chase against him, if your line is any little bit fractured, he'll find a gap. His sidestep is so impressive. And we saw in that World Cup final the winning try he got against England, and he's done it many times for Toulouse and South Africa. He's now with Toulon. So I think that their biggest strength obviously is collectively up front, and I think they've developed a real edge to their game. You don't want to give away penalties and give them options to kick to the corner and try and maul against you, because when they get in around that 22 zone, if their breakdown is quick, then if off rucks, they just come around the corner and they get over the gain line. So that's the real challenge for Ireland is stopping them developing their maul and putting pressure on their breakdown, so they don't have real quick ball with big men running at your backs and stuff like that.
Just looking at the odds here for the game, so Ireland are 8-15 favourites, South Africa 13-8 for the game. Of course, home advantage comes into that one as well. Like, when you look at that, you mentioned the South African back three, and I mean, someone like Mapimpi on the wing for them. Like, if Ireland's kicking game is off in any way tomorrow, South Africa can create a bit of magic with that back three.
Yeah, they can, and Mapimpi is he's a brilliant finisher, but he's an incredibly competitive player when he doesn't have the ball as well. So, if Hendricks said a scrum half, if he puts up box kicks, well, Mapimpi is he's so aggressive in the air, and he's so he competes so well, and then they win the ball back in those situations a lot of the time. And there was so much talk in 2018 when Ireland had a brilliant year, winning a Grand Slam series in Australia, beating New Zealand in November. We were number 1 ranked team in the world, coach of the year, player of the year, all that kind of stuff. And one of the big things that was jumping out with that Irish team around that time was our kicking game. The box kicking, the ability to win it back, putting pressure on the opposition, and using your kicking game really so effectively. That kind of opposition team started to get better themselves at kick receipts. They protected the jumper better, and it changed the way Ireland played. And then they probably hit a brick wall in 2019 and just couldn't find any sort of confidence in their game. And the Six Nations was just disappointing, the World Cup warm-ups and the World Cup itself. the point here is, obviously South Africa, a lot of that stuff is really brilliant with South Africa. The way they can get the ball back, and they've shown it. They won a line series as well. So they've built a brilliant side, and I think they've got, Rassie Erasmus and Jack Dienenberg have got the players on board. They've got them fitter. A lot of their players are playing in Europe and Japan. They're pretty fresh when they go into camp. They've developed their skills, and they're implementing what they want to do. So playing to their strengths, and then, going back to your question there, their back three, players like that can score, and when they move the ball, it's a bit of, sometimes they get a bit of criticism for maybe being very direct and kicking the ball a lot, and but they should be complimented for that, because they play to their strengths. And then when they need to score tries, or if they need to move it, they have those players in that backfield. Lucanu Am is not playing; he's injured. He's probably one of the best backs in the world. He's a brilliant 13. Kolbe would probably be on the wing, and Willie Leroux is not. He's on the bench. He's not playing back. So they're changing things around. Willem said at fly half, there's no, they don't have Pollard there as well. So they're really trying to develop. And for them psychologically to come to Dublin and beat Ireland would be a real statement. On the flip side of that, for Ireland to beat the world champions in Dublin would be great as well. Some part of me thinks, God, do we? Because we thought we peaked a little bit early, not consciously that you want to peak and then kind of get to the top of the hill and start coming down the other side. There's nothing wrong with continuing that momentum, and I think for Ireland, they'll be looking to have a really good November, but it's a real acid test tomorrow, because obviously South Africa are in our group at the World Cup. There's a potential, maybe if we get out of the group, to possibly meet France in a quarterfinal or New Zealand. So these big games is kind of money in the bank, and you learn stuff about the way you play. And we struggled a little bit last year in Paris with the physical strength of the French. So we're going to get a real test tomorrow, and you can't just create players that are 120 kilos, 6'6" or 7, right across your back five. South Africa probably can do that because they have so many big men to pick from. But I think we can learn from the way we cope with and not allowing situations like the maul develop. Being really technically good around the tackle area and those collisions, stopping their momentum. And as I said, we did struggle a little bit against France, and we've struggled a little bit before against England when they were flying in 2019. So you can learn a lot from this game. But again, Ireland are kind of, they haven't played since the summer, but they should have a spring in their step playing at home in the Aviva.
That physicality you mentioned, like we spoke to Craig Gray about that, and the 6-2 split, the bomb squad, and just the size that South African pack. Like, if you're from an Irish perspective, Quinny, are you, if you're one on the Irish team preparing to face that physicality, are you preparing for this game any differently than you would for another game, given the size and given the just the intimidating nature of this South African pack, or is it just like any other game?
It's not like any other game. I think it's, I think, Shane, it's an intriguing kind of question. What do you do when you're playing a bigger side? I think you just probably have to be switched on and more alert to the fact that, there's some times when guys run at you in tackles and matches, you make the tackle and you're pretty dominant, and you probably don't have to be as alert or as angry, as fired up as you don't need to be that way every time. But when you play South Africa and their forwards are running around the corner, in other situations you make that leg tackle and you win that gain line a little bit easier. But when you've these kind of big guys running at you, you just have to be, you have to have that enthusiasm, and that you have to be really alert and get off the line really quickly. It's like a big man running at you. If you let him build up a head of steam 10, 12 yards, well, it's more difficult. That impact is a bit more telling. But if you can get 5, 6 yards off the line quicker, he probably doesn't have that speed up. So you just got to focus on doing that more. Sometimes you can't stop it. You've just got to maybe take the tackle and lose the gain line a little bit. But Ireland are a confident side, and they're a fit side, and they're very cohesive, and they showed the rugby they played, and the challenge of winning in New Zealand was immense. So, you know, we're no slouches ourselves. You know, when you think of Furlong and Porter and Sheehan, that front row is as physical, if not, can match any side in the world. They're world-class players. And, you know, the scrummaging, you know, Andrew Porter, he's got to get that side of the scrum right against Malherbe, who's been a rock-solid kind of stonewall for the Springboks for a couple of years. But you just got to be more alert for it, really. And I think if you put down the weights of all the players, there's not going to be like 20 kilos per man. It's going to be one or two players that are a little bit different. I think their two second rows, Etzebeth and Lou Dieger, are bigger than James Ryan and Tyg Byrne. There's probably a couple of kilos on them. But it's that aggressive nature. They know no other way. If you think of CJ Stander when he's played for Munster, Ireland, they love collisions. It's what they've been brought up on. It's the way the game is played a lot in South Africa. So the problem for everybody else in the world is they've developed their skills, and they've become very intelligent in the way they've played against the opposition. And, you know, with Jack Nienaber and Rassie Erasmus being in Munster for a couple of years and making lots of changes, positive changes about with the Springboks, they've had massive success. So that's a real challenge. And as a player, you just know that, and it sounds fairly obvious and stupid maybe, but you know, like I said at the start, is if you go half-hearted into a tackle, you're probably going to come out second best. So Ireland have just got to be switched on and aggressive themselves. And I think, you know, they'll be confident if they can stretch the Springboks and you know, build multi-phase, that they can cause them problems. And that could happen. Ireland could have Ireland can hurt any team the way they played. If they can get some of the stuff they did in New Zealand, they can hurt any side. And that's what I'm looking forward to, what their reaction is like. They've got to set the tone. And I think probably South Africa, one of the big things in a lot of their success in recent years, even in that World Cup final, the way they start the game. If they start well and they get a couple of points on board, they're a great side at building a scoreline, taking away the opposition, deflating the opposition with scrum penalties or breakdown penalties. So yeah, it's an intriguing one, and I think it'll be a real test for Ireland.
Quinny, finally, prediction time. Fill us with a bit of optimism here. I mean, I know we've got the Irish. I'm confident, and I really hope Conor Murray. It's his 100th cap. I think a few people. Gibson Park hasn't played for a while. Obviously, he's on the bench, but Conor Murray starting. You know, I really hope that it's a memorable 100 cap for him. I think he's been world class for a number of years. Has his form dipped a little bit in the last 2 years? Probably a couple of years. But he still has that quality, that experience, and I hope he has a brilliant game. I think Ireland are good enough, and contrary to what Stephen was saying, I'm predicting Ireland to win by 7 or 8 points. Love it, brilliant.
Finally.
Finally some optimism. And of course, we've got the Irish A team playing against the New Zealand select tonight at the ODS as well. So look forward to both of those games. Listen, Quinny, enjoy the action over the weekend.
Cheers, thanks guys.
Thanks a million. Alan Quinlan there with us as he is always on a Friday. I should mention as well the Women's World Cup action continuing this weekend, late tonight, tomorrow morning. So favourites England looking to book a 6th World Cup final appearance. They're taking on the 2014 runners-up Canada. That's at 3:30 tonight/tomorrow morning. And then the hosts and defending champions New Zealand looking to dispatch France in the other semi-final as well. That will be 6:30 tomorrow morning. So 2 early starts, but it's at the semi-final stage and for quality teams on show. So looking forward to both of those games. Now OTB AM at 9:13 on this Friday morning, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio coming up for the rest of today. From 10:30 we have live the crappy quiz. It is back. Adrian winning last week in a shock result, took the crappy quiz world by surprise, given his dire performances of late, breaking the longest streak in sporting history. So congratulations to him. He'll try and defend his title. Not easy to do. I know from experience. 11:30 live, the football kickoff with Ger Cullum and Clive Allen. Clive Allen, the legend. I know Cullum loves speaking to Clive Allen, his good mate as well. So that's coming from 11:30 this morning. 1 o'clock it's OTB Gold, Catherine Switzer. We have the Meath, Mount Rushmore, from 3 o'clock. From 4 it's Team 33's League of Ireland legend interview with Mark Quigley, and then from 6 p.m. OTB Gold with Ronnie Delaney. You can follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best in the latest sports content. After the break, we are live in studio with Daniel Davey, author of the new book on nutrition, Eat Up, The Next Level, Perform at Your Best physically and mentally every day. First though, here's Ireland head coach Andy Farrell talking about Conor Murray's service to Ireland ahead of his 100th cap against the South Africans tomorrow. Back in a sec.
See, I'm in awe of these people. Like, it's pretty special because we all know that through a career to be able to get to that type of milestone of what it really does take. And I suppose when you're a coach or when you're a player, you see all the ups and downs, and you see all the pressures that come in from all sorts of different directions, and you see everyone wants to move on to what they perceive to be the next best thing. I just think somebody who stands up to be counted time and time again, to get to a point like that, I'm in awe of it because the hardest thing is to stay at the top. Of course there's ups and downs, but what the biggest compliment that I could play Conor, I mean, he's a legend of Irish rugby. Everyone knows that anyway, and the abilities that he's shown through the years are second to none. But the biggest compliment that I could give him is that he is a top class bloke. I don't know anyone who's got a bad word to say about him. And we're all obsessed with rugby, but I suppose when it comes down to how he's managed himself throughout his career, there's some bigger things on the way as well, isn't there? And amongst his peers, which really matters to Conor, he is classed as a fantastic human being.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Off the Ball Daily.
A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. The performance rankings, a slight tangent, the crappy quiz, and you had to be there.
5 goals in 20 minutes. It's just, you can't do that. It's the Premier League. You can't do that.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
16 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning OTB AM. You heard Andy Farrell talking about Conor Murray in the ad break there, and news as well on the Irish front this morning. Worrying news: Robbie Henshaw a doubt for tomorrow's game. So we'll wait and see how that emerges and progresses over the next 24 hours or so before that game against South Africa. Now, delighted to be joined in studio at this time by Daniel Davey. So Daniel, I know you've been on this before, but you have a new book out. You'll see it here for folks on the stream. Eat Up, The Next Level, Perform at Your Best physically and mentally every day. #1 best-selling author Daniel Davey, I should mention as well. So what's inspired this book, and I guess in comparison to the previous book you've done?
The first book was about the basic principles of nutrition, and I guess trying to get the message across, as we were just saying, that food and eating good food can actually be easier than a lot of people think. And thankfully that's the feedback I get, that it is relatively simple once you make a start at it, and once you get into it. This book is a progression in terms of my own philosophy and experience. So I'm very fortunate to have been in elite environments for the past almost 10 years. And this is an evolution. This is giving people an insight to how are athletes consistent and what can people take from athletes and those type of those environments to be a little bit more consistent in their own lives. So more nutrition information, a little bit more detail, and then there's a focus on food that supports our immune system and food that you can eat around injury. And I noticed even one of the lads in reception had a cast on his arm, and the first thing I'm thinking about is, I wonder has he thought about the little things that he can do to support his recovery?
Yeah, I doubt he has. Most people don't.
Maybe he's listening to this now and he's like, oh, got to get him on his way out and ask him what I need to do.
Justified coming in this morning if that's what comes of it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned elite background, like maybe for people who are unaware of your background, you play Gaelic games as well and Dublin football as well. So, what's your background? You've worked with Dublin football senior football team. You've worked with Leinster Rugby as well.
Yeah, I played club football for my own club at home, Killarney Mullabrina in Sligo and Ballyboden St Enda's.
So this is Sligo everywhere. Cathal from Sligo, we Cathal learning
I'm from Sligo as well, yeah.
Part.
Screen.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the south and you're the north. But we're still not that far from the coast.
No, we're not.
Yeah, half an hour anywhere in Sligo, you can reach any point. So I'm from Sligo, but I'm in Dublin now for nearly 20 years, and so I've played club football at that level, and I'd like to think that I've lived it. You know, it's always been a fascination of mine. Body composition, performance, strength, all of these things, and now, as I said, immunity and injury. But I've worked with Leinster Rugby for almost 10 years and the Dublin senior football team for 9 years, but I've done other things as well outside of that. It's, you know, golfers, jockey, athletics. It's the variety in sport. Just anybody who's competitive or interested in improving their performance, I really enjoy working with.
I was saying before we came on air as well, like the Michael Scott line from The Office, speak to me like I'm a 4-year-old, and I need that, like in terms of cooking. Like for someone like me, and there's plenty of people watching and listening probably who are similar lines to me, shock and cook.
Yeah.
Like and find it tough to eat healthily. Like I find myself sometimes buying those the fit foods, the ready-made stuff. So it's ready-made, makes it easy. But I mean, some of the recipes you have in here are pure and simple for people who are maybe not cooking inclined.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I was doing a presentation with the Dublin team about 2 years ago, and like people's evolution and people's learning and experience around food evolves quite slowly. It's not like once you have the information or once you have this particular technique, away you go. It's like learning any skill. But I remember one of the lads had said to me beforehand, you know, I didn't realise how simple some of, even the processes like using a single pot and cooking all of your main ingredients in one pot can be. And I shared it, and he said, you're making me sound like a simpleton here.
Yeah.
But that's not it. It's like just having a little process, using a little bit of oil, garlic and salt, and just experimenting with that, and then using different types of meats. It's just introducing really simple approaches to your cooking that can make such a difference. Even your breakfast and overnight oats, combining oats and milk and yogurt and a little bit of honey and putting it in a pot the night before and having it as an option for breakfast the next morning. Those are the type of things that you help people figure out along the way, and then they start going, geez, putting a couple of these things together really does make a difference.
Yeah.
I always remember watching, the Katie Taylor documentary, and when she first moved over to the States and she was trying to cook for herself, and obviously an elite athlete, the best in her career path, but like I was so shocked because there's something you almost assume that athletes know these things or that they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and of course, why would they? Like, they're the same as everyone else. Some people are good cooks, some people are bad cooks, some people are interested, some people aren't. Did you find that much when you were working with people that say they were very invested in like the gym, or they knew exactly what they had to do on that side of things, but when it came to nutrition and feeding themselves right, that was harder to ingrain?
I remember that as well, and it surprised me to a point, because you're talking about somebody at the very top of their game, and you think, God, you think that they're good at everything, particularly if it's something that can influence your performance to this extent. It's second only to your training, and then of course sleep and mindset. But it's so important. But athletes, some of them can just get by, and we know so many of them that reach those levels, and they talk now. I've heard the stories of people coming in here talking about fries the day before or the days of All Irelands. I've heard, and I get these messages sent to me. The reality is there's probably about 10-15% of athletes that just cover all bases, everything from their rehab, to their sleep. You know, you might have heard stories about the likes of, you know, Jamie Heaslip. Now it's the likes of Josh van der Fleer, who just do everything. The Gary Ringroses, they have every aspect of their preparation absolutely spot on. And then you've got a group in the middle, I suppose, who they're influenced by others in the environment, and then if you really have a strong message around its importance, are going to listen and take these things on board. But athletes want to play a sport, and they want to train, and they want to be in good shape, and it has evolved. You know, the understanding of its value, it has evolved, but it didn't start like that. And that was the first book and the second book. As you can see it written on it, the recipes are things that I had to put together for athletes to make this simple and accessible. And now what's great is that it's mothers and grandmothers and kids that are trying these types of recipes. So the answer to your question is you're always going to have a huge range of people who are interested, not interested, and some of them just do it because they have to.
It's funny, like you mentioned that thing about, you know, maybe 10-15% of athletes doing everything to cover all bases. Like I sat down, and the interview's coming up later on this morning, but Ian Rush and Neville Southall yesterday, and something Neville Southall said really stuck with me along those lines, where he was talking about when he was a goalkeeper for Everton and Wales. He would spend hours reading books and trying to perfect little things, so even improving minor things like his kit, his behaviour, his diet. And he said, if I changed 100 things, I got 1% better because of one of them, then it was worth it. And that's probably the thing. Like, so many elite athletes and less elite athletes are probably watching this and thinking, right, you could pick up something from the book and think about one little aspect of your diet that could make the world of difference. It's only a 1% difference, but that's fairly big when it comes to elite. It's absolutely huge. And what I have to manage is it definitely a stage was an obsession, you know, how much value nutrition can provide for health and performance. It's, you know, in terms of lifestyle and how we feel and our energy and our outlook and confidence and mood, I need to manage my own so that I'm not putting it on people. Yeah. But I talk a lot within team sport environments about you're eating for your teammate and you're eating for the team as well as just yourself. So if you talk about that 1%, you think about everybody making that difference to their performance and how that can raise the bar and that can raise your energy levels and what you can give. It could be that tackle, it can be that score in the last minute of the game because you got the energy to do it, or it can be you not getting sick or not getting that injury. That's the reality of it. So yeah, it can has that impact. It's important to, and it's something you speak about as well, is building a positive relationship. You actually read a couple of pages. Yeah. Listen, I'm the audience here. I'm the one who needs something like this to make things simple. But like, that is so important, having a positive relationship with food, because very often a lot of us, and I'd be guilty of it as well, sometimes at the weekend, you know, you'd be sitting there going, I'll get a takeaway. It's just easy, simple. Yeah. But like, you can actually have tasty food that's good for you as well. Yeah, I've seen over the past, particularly the past 3 or 4 years, I've seen a big shift. And it's in the athlete world as well. So it's this building a positive mindset towards food being an investment, whereas we are surrounded with how do we cut calories? What do we cut out? What should we avoid? Is this food healthy or is this not healthy? And that's not good for us. And there's also an obsession, and I include a section in it as well. There's a bit of an obsession around tracking. It's funny how people can get into this and then not actually know how to get out of it and think that that's the only way. And it's exactly the other end of the spectrum is this very close relationship or connection between how we're feeling. We've had a bad week or a bad day, and the answer is it's a bottle of wine on a Friday, or it's a takeaway, and that only compounds the issue. So it's recognizing, well, what is it for you or what is it for me, and what are the small changes? It could be a breakfast for somebody, it could be the Friday night for somebody else, it could be bringing your lunch for somebody else. So it's not
it's motivation and our relationship with food can go up and down depending on the season, depending on whether we've had a big weekend, whether there's a wedding coming up, holidays, those type of things. And we're trying to create that little bit more consistency and remove those kind of shorter term perspectives on food.
And what would be your number one piece of advice to someone who's looking to introduce that sort of consistency to their life?
It's to look at what their, I would call them pinch points are. Where are the stress points in your week or in your day? And if you actually just focus on prioritizing something for that, it can make this huge knock-on effect on the rest. So a tiny example, I had a soccer player come to me looking to reduce his body fat during COVID. And he had a good 5-6% body fat to lose, and the only thing we focused on was his lunch, because he didn't have good options within the canteen and where he was, and he wasn't consistent bringing in his lunch. And what was happening was he'd either skip lunch or not have something substantial at lunchtime, and he would come home in bad form and really hungry, and he'd overeat. And that this cycle continues. The only thing he did was focus on lunch, and it had this huge effect on his energy levels, on how he felt in the rest of the afternoon, but also he wasn't overeating when he came in, or when he came in the evening, and he dropped that body fat. You know, so it's that just real clarity on one particular area, like you mentioned already, Shane.
Yeah. My stomach rumbled as you were saying that. I skipped breakfast this morning. I'm like, I feel like a naughty kid in school. The headmaster here.
That's the last thing. That's the last thing you should be thinking, because it's just right. Okay, well,
fix it.
Go after that tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it takes that. Do you notice a difference between, and you do touch on it in the book as well, like dealing with athletes versus non-athletes? Like, and I'm sure you have both sides of the spectrum as well. But is there a massive difference? Is it as big a difference as people think?
Well, first of all, the demands of those environments are significant, but also there's accountability within these environments. You've got physios, strength and conditioning coaches, you've got the coaches, and there's the competition element. And if you're not doing these elements, somebody else will, which means you're not going to play. So that's a huge driving motivator. And we don't tend to have that if we're outside of those environments, or we're outside team environments or clubs, and that's the benefit that being a part of something brings. And the reality of it is that it is much more challenging when you're on your own, and you got to build in that accountability. And it's understanding those principles first and foremost. So what exactly, like you mentioned already, Shane Kathleen, about what is the one thing? Well, look at your week and try and create what I would consider as a high-performing schedule or plan for yourself, and prioritise one or two areas. And there's a very simple process, and people do it in business, people do it in sport, but there isn't enough thinking about it within lifestyle more broadly in the general population. What's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
And people in business, and you probably do it even in here, well, what are the things that people are engaging with? What are people not engaging with? Well, it's exactly the same within your nutrition. Did that one thing that I tried to implement, your breakfast, how did that make me feel? Did my energy levels improve? Did I like the breakfast? You know, did it make me feel full? Or do I need to try something different?
Yeah.
And it's that simple process over one or two things. That's what happens within elite environments around game plans, around strength and conditioning plans, around every aspect. And that's what I'm trying to communicate around simple planning.
Absolutely. How did it make me feel? It made me feel hungry and sad this morning. Breakfast, I have to say, so I'm definitely.
And your tummy is rumbling.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to fix that. Lovely comment, finally, Daniel in from Shifty Lad, one of our regular comments on the stream. He says, Daniel, do you have a website or Twitter to give an appointment? Do you deal with long-time injury, etc.? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I do. The injury one is fascinating for me, because I think that's the space that's evolved the most in recent years. And it's actually not necessarily just the information. People immediately think about things like supplements. It's more of having a process, maintaining strength and maintaining a structure. That's the big value. I have a website. It's daveynutrition.com, and it's at Davey Nutrition on all platforms.
So can people get the book on the website? All good bookstores as well, I'd imagine?
Eason's, Dubray, all of them, the book station, they all have the book now, and for everyone who's bought it and supported it, thanks very much.
Yeah, and
very much appreciated.
Lovely pictures of the ingredients and recipes as well, which it just makes it simple. You've got the served to preparation time, cooking time, total time, equipment, and just goes through it, and ingredients on the left hand side as well. So
yeah, the idea is evidence, so it's an evidence-based nutrition book with practical ways of you achieving that evidence-based approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So eat up, the next level, perform at your best physically and mentally every day. Daniel Davey, thanks a million for coming in.
Thank you.
As always.
Thanks very much.
Much appreciated. Folks, that is all we have time for. 9:33 AM on this Friday morning. OTB AM back Monday morning with the return of Ger, Nathan and those famous Gillette Labs performance rankings. We'll have all the reaction, of course, to Ireland's game against South Africa, which is tomorrow. Reflect on the weekend's Premier League action with the former Manchester City defender Nedum Nua, plus much more besides. Right now, we're going to leave you with the chat I've already mentioned. Sat down yesterday in Dublin with Liverpool legend Ian Rush and Everton legend Neville Southall, two Welsh legends in their own right as well. So spoke to them and we got into some really, really interesting topics. So enjoy and have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Alright, I'm here in the Marker Hotel in Dublin, and you'll see from the placards behind me, in Welsh territory you'd imagine, but we are in fact in Dublin, not Cardiff, and joined by two bona fide Welsh legends, 166 appearances for Wales between them. We have Neville Southall, one of the greatest goalkeepers of all time, of course, just to 750 appearances for Everton, not bad. A couple of league titles, a couple of FA Cups as well in there, and the man on the outside there as well, Ian Rush, 346 goals, I think it is, Ian, for Liverpool, 5 league titles and 2 European Cups. You're both very welcome, lads, and I suppose I wanted to start by asking, I know, Neville, you're an Everton legend, but Ian, did you grew up as an Everton supporter, am I right in saying?
Yes, that's it. I used to go and watch Everton play when I was a kid, and I remember when I was playing for Chester, and the manager Alan Oakes said that Everton are coming to watch you. And Gordon Lee was the manager at Everton at the time, and never forget, in them days it was newspapers, not like social media, it was newspapers, and he said, and Virgie said, like, Ian Rush was not good enough to play for Everton, and I was gutted, to tell you the truth. I was gutted. Then three months later I signed for Liverpool, and it was in me back of my mind there, I'm going to make Everton pay.
I have often wondered, like, when, like, say you're both Welsh teammates, you were Welsh teammates, of course, throughout the 80s and part of the 90s, but when you're both playing for a rival, Everton and Liverpool, rival clubs in Merseyside, are you still able to kind of socialise and go out together in Liverpool, or is it a case of, geez, you can't be seen as a toffee and a red together? What was your experience of living in the same city but playing for very much rival teams now?
Well, Rush used to go to different places from me, to be fair. much different places. No, look, I think it's just mutual respect. And I would have never thought of him as an enemy. I just thought of him as a great player. And you want to play against great players in your career. And the more times you played him, the better it got. And what I thought what was nice is we never really spoke about it with Wales. We just, whatever the score was just gone, we were concentrating on Wales. So yeah, we didn't really have a problem with that at all.
One of the famous games where you came up against each other was the 89 FA Cup final, 3-2 Liverpool, instant classic. Ian, you with the 2 goals for Liverpool that day. A load of Irish lads on I know Kevin Sheedy was on your own team, and you had Staunton and who else? Whelan, Aldridge, Houghton. It was an Irish team, a lot of lads there. What was it like coming up against this guy? I mean, he made your life hell that day particularly, but at Liverpool got over the line. But it's still one of those FA Cup finals that you can maybe look back on now and think, geez, what a classic of a match to be involved in.
Well, it wasn't really, because we lost.
Maybe not for Everton fans, sorry.
Yeah. No, look, we were never in the game really until we made a substitution. I think Stuart McCall came on, changed the game a little bit. It was boiling hot, and to be fair, it's difficult when you play against Liverpool because they're a good team. Do you know what I mean? And people think that it's rivalry, but it is rivalry. But if Liverpool don't have a strong Everton, they don't do as well. And if Everton don't have a strong Liverpool, they don't do as well, because you need that rivalry, I suppose, in the city as much as you need the respect. And I think respect between the two clubs. But we used to look at him and his team, say, right, we need to match these and we need to beat these if we want to win anything, because they were the best team in Europe at the time, to be fair, if not the world, because they never used to play the Mickey Mouse World Games then, did they? But yeah, so I think for us it was a case of, if we could beat these, then we could finish above them. We'd win the league and we'd win a cup.
Was it different for you, Ian, when you're through on goal and you're coming up against Neville, a goalkeeper you know so well from training with the national team? Are you psychologically thinking of it any differently, or has it all just happened so fast that it's irrelevant, really?
I think it just happened so fast. I think if you think about it, you won't score. It's as simple as that, and that's what happens. And I think I scored 28 goals against Everton. But it would have been 48 only because of Nev. Because people talk about those I scored, but I missed quite a few one-on-ones and all that because Nev was in goal. So people say that I would genuinely have scored like in my 40s. Against Everton, but when you one-on-one, you don't think about it. You just do what's natural, and that's how you score the goals.
I love hearing about sliding doors moments in footballers' careers, and I know Neville, you came to football relatively late compared to most people. But was it true? And I think you might have written about this before. Like you got a call from Alex Ferguson just prior to them signing Peter Schmeichel, trying to sign you for Manchester United, but. Maybe tell us how that didn't work out, because again, sliding doors moments, life could have worked out in other ways, but as it was, you didn't end up heading to Old Trafford.
No, I mean I never give anybody my home number. I didn't even want to give you the club, to be fair. And then one Sunday afternoon I was sat in the house and the phone rang, and he said, picked it up. He said, "Oh, Alex Ferguson here." And when he had off, I thought it was Andy Gray messing about. So I put the phone down. And then 10 minutes later he phoned back and said, "Oh, it is Alex Ferguson, blah, blah, we're interested in this." And then, obviously, I just said, "Look, you're going to have to speak to my agent, whatever." But Les Seeley told me at the time, whether it's true or not, that once I'd sat by the post in the Leeds game, he wasn't interested.
Right.
So it wasn't that phone call, it was the fact that I sat by the post he didn't like, so... But to me, you got to do what you got to do, haven't you?
You got to have. I mean, football's probably missing character at the minute, and characters. You look at different sports that have characters, and it increases the interest. And maybe that's an element of it that you need more of that. That you need the Di Canios of the world. And
you can't anymore because there's 80 cameras round the ground. And the way that society is at the moment, you can't be seen to be doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Imagine if they say anything out of line, they just get absolutely hammered. So they come out. And it's the blandest thing. It's funny now because I watch the telly on a Sunday and that, and then on a Monday you don't read about the game, you read about what the pundits were arguing about. Nothing about the games, it's about what the pundits said. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, where did we switch from having a good game to having whether Reed Keane said something to Jamie Carragher or Gary Neville? I find it quite weird.
Yeah, I think it's right. Neb's right there. I think it's people say you wish you were playing football today. I don't. Because I had a great time off the pitch as well, and that's what it's all about. And we can have stories to tell when we finish playing football. I think footballers today, I don't think they'll have any. And we had a laugh and a joke in the dressing room every day. I'm not sure whether you get that anymore.
Yeah, well, and also there's no bollockings anymore.
Yeah,
because I know for a fact that some of the people don't like raised voices, which is fine in some ways, but the players we played with, some of them, would like an absolute bollocking at half time to make them play better. So all of them people who want a G-up don't get a G-up because everything's flat. And I think if you look at football now, right, in general, it's all about telling them what they can't do.
Yeah.
Right? It's about you can't play this many games, you can't play this many minutes, you can't train like this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then I think football's flatlined, and that's why you don't get characters. You don't get players like him anymore. You don't get world-class... If you can name me 10 world-class players, you're doing well. Right?
Well, the other thing is as well, like when you look at the modern game, I mean, you talk about sitting beside the post, you'd have 3.5, 4 minutes to sit beside the post for VAR decisions in the modern game, which totally different.
Yeah, see, my thing is, they're not used to watching telly. Why don't they get the people off Gogglebox to do VAR? Right? And then they're used to watching telly, aren't they?
Drawing lines as well, yeah.
And then... they've changed all the terminology to make it all interesting. Yeah. Between the lines and all that. We all play between the lines. That's what's... Yeah. So, we play... And the other thing that gets right on my nerves is, he's a number 6, he's a number 9. What does that mean? Is 9 could be different to his 9. It could be different
to false number 9.
False 9, yeah. A false number 9. Right? Do you know what?
What's a true number 9?
Do you know what a false number 9 is? Somebody who can't play up front and they can't play midfield. So they've got to float around that little area, and they haven't come on a name with him apart from somebody who's not very good. So you become a false nine, so you don't do the run up front, you don't track back in midfield, you're what we would have called a luxury player, but you only put on the last 10 minutes in the hope that you might get a result. But where are you getting all these numbers from? And they all talk as if it's a different language now. I don't get it. Well, what happened to being a centre half? You're not a centre half, you're the number 4.
No offence to all the false number 9s out there. Take any offence. Like Ian, when you look at, and Neville's brought it up, like when you look at the number of world-class players, maybe granted it is less than it used to be, but someone like Erling Haaland, like seeing him day in day out in the Premier League, it almost feel quite privileged as a football fan now to be able to just watch someone of that talent. Like he's like a robot.
Oh, he's incredible. The man, I think he scored 20-odd goals already. So and he's playing in the right side as well. I think Manchester City. I think if Manchester City would have signed Harry Kane last year, I think Harry Kane would do exactly the same. Yeah. No, they've been looking for a proper number 9, not a false one, a proper number 9. And but he's a joy to watch.
Neville, I've read different times, like you're someone who took inspiration from other sports and like, watching whether it be boxers or golfers and trying to, see how they improved balance and agility and different things. There's a great quote from you: "If I changed 100 things and got 1% better because of it, it was worth it." Like you talk about minor kit changes, behaviour changes. For you, it seemed to be when you were a footballer, sweat the small stuff essentially and improve yourself in little ways.
Well, what's the idea of playing football? To be the best. So you have to go through everything all the time to be the best. You don't, and that's the other thing now. I was allowed to do extra. These aren't allowed to do anything extra anymore because they want to get him in. You've done an hour, you better come in because you might get tired. So I can't remember anybody in my career or yours saying, "Oh, you look a bit tired. Probably have a day off this week."
I think you only get tired when you're losing, don't you? If you're winning, you'll never get tired when you're winning.
Yeah. No, I think it's just, if you're going to go and do a job, right, you want to be the best at it. Because somebody down the road, I always thought when I went to training, if I don't do what I want to do today, somebody down the road is going to do it and they're going to be better than me. And I don't want that. I want to be the best. And that's why I like playing against the best. Because that's the way you challenge yourself and get better, by playing against the best.
Well, that's a good point that you raise as well, is that you don't probably get tired when you're winning, and Ian, like one team that maybe is feeling a little bit tired at the minute is potentially Liverpool. Granted, got the job done in their Champions League group, but and then after the City game, everyone's thinking, right, they're going to push on now. This is going to be them. But to lose to Forest and Leeds, two teams you'd expect to beat any day of the week, for Liverpool's team of Liverpool's calibre. How do you assess what's happening with Jurgen Klopp and that team at the minute?
Well, I just think they had such a magnificent season last season. People expecting the same, and you're not going to get that. We nearly won a quadruple. We had a great season, winning 2 trophies. So the expectations are there, and I do think it's a matter of coming back early. They haven't had enough rest, because of the World Cup coming on. And people don't. For the UK, we've had a very hot 2 or 3 weeks in UK, and I know Jurgen likes to keep on full training. You've got to do this training, you've got to train, and they may get tired. And when you get tired, you start feeling sorry for yourself, and things don't happen. And it hasn't happened for Liverpool. I still think they're going to have a good season, but I think it's going to be hard because everyone wants to beat Liverpool. As well, and everyone wants to beat Liverpool. And we're looking at the squad rather than just the 11 now. We're looking at the squad of 22, 23, and they have to perform.
Can I just ask you one that struck me on the drive in? I was just looking at the BBC had an article up talking about Hillsborough chants, and the FA kind of clamping down on this as something that seems to have reared its ugly head in football. Look, it's not a new thing. Rival fans chanting about Hillsborough, and look, Munich and other disasters and tragedies are often chanted about. But what's your take on that? As someone who was there on that day, and look, the families have to listen to all this stuff, but it's fairly disgusting stuff.
Yeah, you just got to stamp it out. I think with what's in there now, I think we've got cameras everywhere now, so I think cameras can spot these people, and I think it's down to the clubs as well. The clubs have got to inform the supporters as well, because it just has to stop.
Nothing's going to stop.
Yeah.
Right, because they won't do enough. Right, what they should do, if they're really serious, is all the stewards wear cameras, like the police do, and then report them straight away. And if it carries on, they shut that section of the ground down. And if it carries on, they take the points off the club.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you're going to get rid of it. Unfortunately, the way society is at the moment, because you can go online and absolutely hammer somebody all the time, and there's no consequence. Everybody thinks they can say what they want now, and there's no consequence to it. So the FA need to grow a backbone, and they need to do something about it. But they're not. They're going to make all the right noises. But how can they stop people chanting?
Yeah.
It's not about, right. It's not about you and the FA saying don't do it. It's about me sat next to him if he says it, and me policing that and going, no, we're not having that. We're not having that as a. But they won't. And there'll be a lot of good people who will try and stop it. But unfortunately, the way society is, it will carry on because and the other thing is they know it hurts. And that's the other thing, they know it hurts. It's disgusting, and I think anybody found chanting like that, or on a homophobic shout, they should be banned for life. And then that might send a proper message. What's the punishment now? You've seen when England play in Europe. What's the punishment for teams where England get racially abused?
Yeah.
A fine, play behind closed doors? No, throw them out the competition and stop it. Otherwise, it's going to carry on. It's disgraceful. I don't know, I think one of the MPs has wrote to the FA, haven't they? I think Ian Burns wrote to the FA to try and stop it. But, come on, if they're shouting, the other club should take responsibility for that, and they should police their own people. It shouldn't be up to somebody upstairs to go, actually, oh, you need to do something about it. It should be the clubs going around, we're not having it, and that's it.
Can I just ask you, lads, finally, and look, we should be talking about this in a positive light because Wales have qualified for their first World Cup since 1958, and it's an incredible achievement on the pitch, and it's a wonderful Wales team to watch. But then there's the whole issue, and we're having to deal with it in the media, I guess, as well, as to how we cover this Qatar World Cup. There's the sports washing, there's the human rights abuses. I saw you on your Twitter the other day, and I know, Neville, you give your Twitter over to different worthy causes at different points. The LGBTQ plus community and how they're treated over there, and the migrant deaths. I could go on, but how do you both feel about the World Cup generally? Because look, on the pitch, we can't wait for the action, but there is that kind of bad taste in the mouth.
You should be asking, what is the criteria for going there? And nobody can find out what the criteria is.
Yeah.
So, people keep saying, well, should players go, should pundits go? Well, that's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking, why is it there?
Why did they get it in the first place?
Yeah, why did Russia get it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These should never have it, because there's no actual criteria that I can think of. And I spoke to the lad at Liverpool, the LGBT fellow at Liverpool, and I think he tried 9 hotels before they'd let 2 men stay in a room together. And you're thinking, all of that, I think it's a disgrace that they've actually put it there. As a player, you want to go, and as a country, we've got to go because we've got to, I suppose, inspire the next generation of footballers, boys or girls.
Yeah, I think Neb's right there. I think this should have been done when the draw was made for the in Qatar, not like 8 years ago or something like that. That should have been done then. It's too late now because, as it's coming up to it, because everyone wants to see the World Cup. It's in Qatar, so we have to get on with it. But no, I think especially for Wales, 1958 was the last time, and it's unfortunate that they have to go to Qatar to see him play again. So hopefully it'll be more in the Europeans next time if they qualify.
In a word, lads, as we wrap up, how far will Wales get, do you think, in this World Cup? I suppose England, USA and Iran in the group?
I think they're looking to. I think they're capable of getting to the second round. I think they've got the USA and Iran, the final games against England. I'm hoping that they've secured enough to 4 points. I think that could qualify for second place. Then you go in against England, looking full of confidence, and you don't really want to be getting to that last game against England where you need to beat them. Even though all the Wales, if you ask some people in Wales, they'd rather lose to USA and Iran and beat England and not qualify rather than do that. I know, but I think we can get to the second round.
What have you Neville? How far?
Well, I look at the 3 teams and think that all of them are beatable.
Right.
So we should get out of the group. And then it's luck of the draw, isn't it?
Yeah,
well, there's no reason why they can't get out of the group, because England aren't having a great time, which might suit them. America, USA are half decent. Iran might be our hardest game.
Yeah.
Because, you
expect it to win.
Well, yeah, we expect it to win heavily, and we don't do so well when we're favourites. Wales are good at being underdogs. So, but if they get through, then it's up to them. And I really expect them to get through to the second bit, and then it's a matter of luck of the draw, whether your players all stay healthy, because that's the other thing. Yeah. The weather's going to take a lot out of them, and I think we could be looking here. I don't see why you can't get quarter-final, semi-final.
Absolutely. Listen, lads, Neville, Southall, Ian Rush, two legends. Thanks a million for your time this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your time in Dublin. If you get the pints in, enjoy them.
Thanks.
Thanks a million.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent modes.
Off